Hey guys, you are watching your anime world. How are you all? Please support to subscribe this channel for watching new interesting stories. So in this video, we will see second part, what if Deku was abandoned and sold to the pits. Here is short summary. Izuku was abandoned by his father and sold into the fighting pits. Have to fight and kill to survive. Fortunately his quirk fueled by blood. Himiko was sold to the pits as well, where you do what you need to survive. Together they found something to survive for. A once-in-a-lifetime offer. Introduce some chaos into the system, said the rat. For our family, they said. IzukuxToga. But before we start, if you want more stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe and like this video. And if possible share this video with your friends. Now let's start the story. Before you go and get changed, I would like to have a discussion with you, Mr. Midorya. All Might called out to Izuku before he and Himiko left. Izuku nodded his head, and Himiko continued off to get changed. Izuku set his case down and turned to face Japan's #1 hero. Yes, sir, Izuku said. He kept his tone casual. All Might noticed that, but he also noticed the boy's muscles tensing in case the situation turned violent. You can relax, Mr. Midorya. I have no intention of harming you or your family unit. All Might said, coming a bit closer. To say that I was surprised when I learned of the offer that was made to you by Nezu would have been an understatement. I appreciated your aid in the battle with Overhaul. What you did once he was defeated and in custody is a different matter. I can appreciate your sentiment, but I would do it again, Izuku replied. A hero needs to strive to be better than others, to hold themselves to a higher standard, even if that standard is unobtainable. There are times when in the course of battle, it may be necessary to take a villain's life, but we must always resolve to use that as a final result, not to kill a man who was already beaten and subdued. There is a system in place. We must trust in that system. All Might said as he came to a stop a few feet from Izuku. I don't trust your system, Izuku said. All Might, you don't understand what Overhaul represented to my family. To you, he was just a villain that needed to be brought into custody. In fact, I bet you didn't know more that he was an extremely dangerous target, so much in fact that they needed you to bring him in. Is that correct? All Might nodded. He had been brought in at the last minute after reuniting with his old sidekick, Sir Night-Eye. He would have almost died during the raid if it hadn't been for Izuku's daughter, Eri. Then why are you here if you do not trust in the system? First, so I don't go to jail, Izuku said with a smile as he held up one finger. Second, so I can have a chance to watch my daughter grow up and hopefully have something of a normal life, whatever she defines as her normal. Third, to change the system. The system failed Eri, Himiko, and me at every turn. The system is corrupt, police and heroes, it is broken and needs to be changed. Sometimes, you have to burn it down to rebuild it properly. Is that what you intended to do? Burn it down? All Might asked, studying the young man standing before him. If need be, Izuku looked at All Might, the bright costume, the smile, the heroic pose, though no one was beside them. He stared deep into All Might's eyes. You understand loss, Izuku said. All Might raised an eyebrow. You understand pain and what it is like to look at death and do all you can not to flinch. Whoever put that on display in front of you, did you try to drag them in, or did you kill them? All Might didn't say anything. I bet you killed them because not only did they kill someone you cared about, maybe even loved. If it was someone on that level, I bet they were pretty bad, maybe even a monster, so you didn't bat an eye when you killed them. That night, you probably whispered something to the person you lost. All Might just nodded. That was Overhaul, not just to Himiko and me but to Eri. We both know what it is like to have blood on our hands, but we do it so others don't have to. The other kids in this class don't know what it is like to make the hard choice, to know what it is like to have to take a life. I have killed other people besides Overhaul, but his face doesn't come to me when I sleep. Izuku paused. He took a deep breath before he bowed to All Might. I am sorry that you used your strength to kill him. I wasn't capable of doing it otherwise, but when I did it with the belief that I was going to prison and that I knew for a fact my family's monster was gone. With your permission, I would like to go get changed now. Izuku took the hero's silence as consent. Mr. Midoriya, All Might called after the young man. Izuku stopped and turned back around. Why do you want to be a hero? So my daughter doesn't have to be, he replied, picking up his case and leaving the room. Himiko. She walked into the locker room and whistled at all the girls in various stages of undress. They all paused. Momo blushed, but Himiko noticed that she had turned slightly. She kept looking back at Himiko. She would have to file that away for later. Ochako huffed, seeming more annoyed, staring at her costume. Toru. Well, Himiko had no idea. She was staring at a pair of gloves and boots. Kyoka gave her a wink as she slowly pulled her tight leather pants over her thong. Mina looked at Himiko, twirled her bra over her head, and threw it into her locker. Itsuka flashed her a smile as she continued to get changed. She wondered what Izuku's outfit would look like and if he would think she looked pretty. She blushed and chastised herself slightly. Here she was, the ninth wielder of One for All, and she was wondering if a boy she liked would think her hero outfit was cute. She stood there and closed her eyes, let her mind indulge for a moment, but pulled it back. She had things to do, she needed to get better, and All Might didn't have the time for fantasy. Later, she could giggle and enjoy these feelings after school, but until then. Sue looked around the room at the girls. We are pretty hot. Which caused the room to laugh. Himiko took a deep breath as she went to her locker. She set her case down, slowly undid the lock, and raised the lid. A smile started to spread across her face. Izuku. He stepped into the boys' locker room as the other guys were already stripping down. He went to his locker and removed his uniform. It wasn't long till Mineta called for all their attention. Feast your eyes, boys, he said, standing on a bench, hand on hip in the other, pointing towards the girls' locker room. I am sorry that all of you will be forgotten in the minds of the Seminute hotties on the other side of the wall once they, he paused dramatically, lay their eyes upon the glory that is Mineta Minoru, the future top-ranked hero, and harem king. His voice dramatically. Please refrain from drawing attention to our classmates' hypothetical state of dress and becoming a harem king. Such goals have no such place in heroics, Ida commented. What is a harem king? Izuku said, setting his case down. How the hell do you not know what a harem king is? Denki said, staring at him in disbelief. Have you been under a rock? A few other guys rolled their eyes and slapped their foreheads. Eijiro did the honor of reaching over and slapping him on the back of the head. No, you idiot, he was living in a pit. Oh, my bad, Denki said, rubbing his head. Well, let me explain to you, Mineta said, rubbing his hands together. A harem king has a beautiful woman who is in love with him and has all the beep with him. He is worshipped like a god. Do they love each other? Or just him? Izuku responded. Just him. That is what makes it so great. Mineta responded with a smile and thumbs up. Nah, I'll pass, Izuku responded. But you keep shooting for that, Mineta. But have you never watched anime? Denki asked. No, I watched some when I was super little, and some cartoons with Eri after we got out, he shrugged. What do you do at night, then? Shiro asked, his curiosity piqued. Try to help with dinner, but I am not very good at it, he paused. Homework, play with Eri, clean up, watch something on television together, give Eri her path, spend time with Himi. Oh, and work or try to look things up to cook. I can give you some pointers or even teach you some simple cooking things if you like. Shiro said with a smile. That would help, he responded with a sheepish smile. I tried to learn when Lunch Rush gave us some lessons when we first got her, but I still have a hard time. Izuku got into his costume. It wasn't nearly as flashy as others, but he felt it was practical. Black cargo pants, steel-reinforced boots, armor-reinforced shirt. Deep crimson-red gauntlets ran up his forearms, with small blades that curved back for drawing blood, a matching vest with reinforced pouches on the inside containing vials for blood, and a hood. He attached his half-mask and looked at the mirror in the locker. It worked, and he liked it. He felt he could mood, nothing flashy, perfect for the underground. Not bad by man, Eijiro said, patting him on the shoulder. Let's go do this thing. Training grounds. The boys were all chatting. discussing the others' costumes and things to change and improve. Mineta was talking about the girls. Then they arrived for a brief moment, and all their conversation stopped. Momo's hero costume includes a crimson high-collared, sleeveless leotard with silver lines at her waist and around her arms. Her arms are open to expose her skin from her neck to just below her navel. She wears calf-length red boots with heels that dip sharply down in the center. She also wears 2 gold utility belts around her waist and a thinner one around the top of her chest below her shoulders. Her costume design is intentional, allowing her to create items on her body from as many points as possible. This is because her quirk can only be used if her skin is exposed. Toru stepped out in gloves and boots, and immediately, every boy could assemble them. That meant if those were visible, then it must mean that she was wearing nothing else. Mineta's nose began to bleed as he passed out. Tenya looked away so fast it was almost like he gave himself whiplash. Jiro's hero costume comprises a black leather jacket, a long salmon-colored shirt with a few rips at the collar and hem, tight black leather pants, and boots featuring stereos incorporated into their shafts. She has 2 minor, triangular red paint marks below her eyes, a plain black choker, and white fingerless gloves. Denki's eyes lingered on her, as did Izuku's. Her punk rock vibe was rather hot. When she paused and applied dark purple lipstick, he blushed and looked away. Sue's hero costume is a bright green turtleneck bodysuit with 2 black lines running down it, each framed with yellow. She wears tan-colored gloves with large buckles on each wrist guard and a headband and goggles with dark green tinted lenses attached on either side. Her costume also includes 2 matching belts, one above her beeps, a strap at either side going around her shoulders, and one around her waist, with little green dots embedded all the way around. She wears tight black boots with markings of A, V, on her thighs and green webbed flippers resembling frogs' toes on her feet. It just hugged Sue's body. It showed off every curve the girl had, and boy, did she have some curves. She noticed the boys looking at her, and though her face showed nothing, she was happy inside. Knowing that others thought she was attractive was something she had battled with in high school. Mutant quirks sometimes made things hard. That was why you saw a lot of mutants with other mutants, as finding real love was hard. They tended to get fetishized a lot. She was thankful they weren't making lewd comments, though, she didn't want to have to smack someone on the first day. Mina wears a tight bodysuit with a camouflage pattern ending just above her beeps. She also sports a plain white domino mask over her eyes. Her look is complete with a tan-colored sleeveless waistcoat, white fur along its collar, cropped and unbuttoned, and custom-made plum violet and beige boots. The mask stands out beautifully against her pink skin, and a few of the boys immediately flush at the thought of Mina in a white bikini or something even more scandalous. Ochako felt uneasy as she wore her hero costume. The outfit was a black full-body suit with a pink design running down the middle of her torso. Her chest had 2 black semi-spheres, and pink stripes started at her midsection. The costume had a deep pink choker and 2-toned pink sleeves with cuffs. She also wore matching accessories, including round gauntlets with handles, chunky knee-high boots, and a 2-piece belt with a round buckle. She noticed the looks the boys gave her, making her blush even more. Her costume was supposed to be more puffy, like a space suit, not so tight. And Ochako had the figure to fill it out. She was round in all the right places, and things bounced when she moved. Itsuka stepped out immediately, looking for Izuku. When she saw him look at her, she started to blush. She saw him mouth the word, "Wow." In her hero costume, Itsuka wore a knee-length turquoise kipao dress with a black double-beeped corset that stopped below her chest. Underneath the dress, she sports black short pants. Her outfit is accessorized with a brown utility belt around her hips, with a pouch attached at the back. She also wears a thin black domino mask around her eyes and white-heeled navy blue boots with wide vamps that reach down to her toes, filled with white slips. Okay, so she would indulge some now and later as well. Last to emerge was Himiko. She wore black-heeled knee-high boots and blood-red leather pants that merged into a black corset around her chest, accentuating her pale skin. A blood-red leather trench coat was over the top with tiny blades that hung down from other points. Her piped black mask, the black-handled knives strapped around her thighs, a utility belt around her waist with more boxes attached to it on either side. She had a unique appearance, with a black mask hanging loosely around her neck. The mask was adorned with pale gray metal pieces arranged in a menacing grin. On either side of the mask were 3 large silver canisters, with needles connecting them to 2 larger cylinders hidden under her jacket and strapped to the back of her belt. Izuku walked forward. "Wow, you all look amazing," he said, smiling. "Finally, someone compliments us," Mina said, laughing. Izuku nudged Ochako. "I like your hero costume, it looks good." Doing his best to reassure the girl, Ochako blushed some more. "You think so?" she said, looking herself over. "I wanted to be more puffy, like a space suit, but I guess I wasn't specific enough with the design department." "Well, I think you look cool," he replied. "And if you don't like it, you can always put in for a change later." "You're right, Izuku. Thank you," she broke out in a smile. "I like your costume also, it's pretty cool." Izuku smiled and walked over to Himi, taking her hand and giving her a twirl. "Holy shit, Himi." Himiko laughed and briefly kissed him. "You like baby?" Izuku nodded, and some of the other boys started to come over and add their compliments. Izuku stepped up to Itsuka. "You look so beeping hot right now," he whispered. Itsuka blushed and playfully punched his arm. "Thanks, you look pretty good yourself, stud," she replied. "Well, children, they say the clothes make the hero, and I see all you look quite dashing in your outfits," All Might said as he emerged his trademark smile. "Now, first, young Yao Yorzu and young Hagakure, please come here." The 2 girls took a nervous gulp and walked over to All Might. "Young Hagakure, I want you to go to the design department immediately. I cannot and will not allow you to run into battle naked. Now, off with you, do not worry about what you will miss today, as seeing that you are properly protected is more important. If you hurry, you may still be able to participate in the training." "Thank you, All Might," Toru said with a hint of awe. She had come to terms with running around naked. In fact, she enjoyed it at times, but the thought of being groped by people she didn't want to be grouped by had been something she had to deal with and try to come to terms with. "There is nothing to thank me for, young lady. I may have strides to take in learning to be a teacher, but ensuring that you are properly protected is something I cannot overlook. Now run along." Toru was smiling, though no one could see it of course, as she ran off. "You are to do the same but after class, Ms. Yaoyorozu, for the same reasons. I understand the need for such skin exposure, and I am glad the design department had enough sense to reject the first proposal." Momo blushed. "But your protection is important as well." "Thank you, All Might," she responded, still blushing. "Now, rejoin the class." He smiled as she ran back to her classmates, and he noticed how most of them immediately went to check on her and make sure she was okay and that Toru was as well. All except for Mineta, who groggily got to his feet before looking at the girls, and a fountain of blood sprouted from his nose, sending the boy back to the ground. All Might shrugged. He was sure the boy would be fine. "Now, today's lesson is going to be about adapting and overcoming. With the aid of Professor Shokin, we are going to have you split into teams of 2. All Might smiled. "Now bear with me, this is the first heroic class for all of us." Itsuka rolled her eyes when he pulled out index cards and a small pair of glasses that sat on the end of his nose. All the students smiled, seeing the number 1 hero so unguarded. "Now Professor Shokin has taken up a position at the end of the street. In teams of 2, you are going to have to approach the building at the far end and secure the bomb in the lobby. Rest assured that it is not an actual bomb but paper. Match, ha ha ha," he said slightly robotically, pause for laughter. The class groaned as he read his stage notes out loud. Itsuka's faces palmed. "To determine teams, we are going to have a random draw, then everyone will take a vest from the crate. These will be your sensors to tell you if you have been hit. 3 hits, and you are out. The focus of this exercise is to learn how to work together to approach a hostile situation within a defined time limit of 15 minutes. After everyone competes, we will have hand-to-hand combat training and then 1 hour of quirk training." All Might put his glasses and the index card away. "I will oversee this portion of your exercise before I turn you over to Professor Kwannon for hand-to-hand, then Professor Shielanus for quirk training. Now my little zygotes, draw your lots and don your vests, and the large sensor goes center mass. He smiled. The students came to draw their lots and grabbed their vests, communication relays, and a map of the area. Team 1, you will have 10 minutes to figure out your approach, the rest of you will join me in the control room. When it is your turn, you will have only 30 seconds once you enter the starting area, so make sure you observe your classmates and formulate your plans. Well, that kind of beeps for us, Izuku said with a smirk, just the man stacking the deck against us. Kyoka smirked, damn the man, save the empire. Teams. Kyoka and Izuku, Himiko and Sato, Mina and Eijiro, Itsuka and Tenya, Fumikage and Ochako, Su and Denki, Mezzo and Yuga, Koji and Shoto, Momo and Toru, Mineta and Kyoka and Izuku. Any ideas? Izuku said as they walked into the starting area, looking at their maps. Well, I am going to hazard a guess that Professor Shokan probably has some sort of shooting quirk, Kyoka said, looking toward the end of the block. Stands to reason, Izuku said, rubbing his head. If we can figure out where they are shooting from, that could help us with some angles and everything. If it is a loud shot, then the echo will make that hard for me. A quieter one, I may be able to help locate them, Kyoka replied. We can stick to alleys for the initial part till we get about here, then we have to cross in the open to get to the other side. She ran her finger along the route. Once we hit that point, it is all open ground, Izuku said. We have no idea what the cover will be like. So I think we stick to the alleys, try to find something to provide us cover when we have to cross the open areas, Kyoka said with a smirk. Think you can keep up? I will do my best, he replied. So I am curious, she said after silence. You and Himiko seem to love each other very much. What is with the open marriage thing? She held her jacks. I have excellent hearing. Well, I wasn't expecting that, but you were right. I love her madly, he replied. Part of it is about control. While in the pit, we were sometimes required to serve some special guests. Kyoka's eyes widened. Most of the time, it was about as bad as you want to imagine, but sometimes it was rather pleasant. Well, at least it was as pleasant as it could be. Himi likes girls as well as boys, and well, I like girls. After living where we didn't know if we would die tomorrow, we want to live freely and enjoy ourselves. What does one have to do to get an invite? Kyoka said with a smile. I swing both ways, and I don't want anything serious. I want to have some fun, sow my wild oats. Observation room. I wish we could hear what they are talking about. Denki said, looking at the screen. All Might blushed and said, they are just discussing strategy. Kyoka and Izuku, we can talk about it later at the cottage if you like. He smiled, looking over her body with a lustful twinkle. Kyoka returned the smile and the look as she admired his muscles. Sounds good. Do you think we are going to pass this thing? Honestly, probably not, he said, looking at their target. But I look at it as I hope we can help the rest of the class. I think the latter teams are going to have the best chance. The buzzer started as soon as they exited the start area, and before they could even make it behind a building, Izuku's sensor went off. They dashed behind the building. Well, it wasn't a loud shot, he said. We are too far. I didn't hear anything, Kyoka apologized. That was a stupid good shot, though. Yay, that is some bullshit, Izuku replied, let's go. Whoever this professor was, she was deadly with her accuracy. They managed to get past the first clearing but were tagged, 4th floor from what I can guess, Kyoka said, what they are using is very quiet. They ran through the next set of alleys, pausing before they would have to enter the clearing. How now, brown cow? Kyoka said, not hazarding a peek out, open area at least 50 yards to any cover, even then, it was minimal. There is no way I am going to make that clearing, Izuku said, looking around. You take any gymnastics classes? I took a tumbling class, learning how to fall, why? Kyoka replied, curious. Okay, would you mind giving me some blood? Izuku paused. I am assuming for your quirk, Izuku nodded. I am not that strong. I don't know how much it will help. Well, all I have is Himi's and my own. Any extra will help, Izuku replied. This is what I am thinking. I will power up and then expend it all in one throw. You want to throw me like a lawn dart? Kyoka replied, surprised at his suggestion. Is this an excuse to grab my ass? She smirked. It is a nice ass, Izuku said. Can't it be both? He said with an innocent smile. So we run out. Your lawn dart me as far as you can. I land and make a run for the bomb. He nodded. That sounds dumb as hell, but beep it. Don't let my death be in vain. Izuku said dramatically. We shall sing songs of your sacrifice in the halls of heroes tonight. She responded. So, how do you want to take the blood? Izuku pulled out a syringe. Easiest way, the least fun way but the easiest. Kyoka smiled, removing her arm from her jacket. Izuku noticed she had great muscle tone in her arms. They were still slender, but he could see that she worked out consistently. She gave him her best demure look. Jesus, you are beeping beepy. You charmer, she teased. After he drew some blood, she had to admit it was weird to see him drink it, but it was also kind of hot. She did have a bit of a secret vampire fetish. She watched him pop another vial, and the crimson wraps formed on both arms before they all shifted to one. She let out an eep when he placed his hand on her stomach just below her belly button and lifted her one-handed. He used his other hand to hold her steady as he adjusted his hand placement, making her giggle. So you're ticklish, he said. Say anything, and I blow out your eardrums, she threatened her jack, moving threateningly. Okay, it is going to be 3 steps the throw, he said. Good luck, he said with a smile. He ran out and took 2 steps on through Kyoka, expending all his strength at once. His sensor lit up with a 3rd hit, and an electric jolt went. Ow beep, he yelled. Observation room. Did I forget to mention that would happen? All Might said sheepishly. Jiro, this mother beeper just threw me like a lawn dart, she thought. She heard the shot better this time than the sound of a chamber being clipped. They are reloading. As Kyoka hit the ground, she rolled and dived to the left instead of forward, but no sensor hit. Getting her feet under her, she pushed off and ran for the building entrance. She could see the bomb through the glass door. Reload. Kyoka stopped moving forward. No hit. She dashed again to reload. She zagged left. Hit. One more. She was done. Reload. Hero time. Kyoka dived, throwing her arms in front of her face, and crashed through the glass door. She rolled, wincing at the cuts, and tagged the bomb. The hero team wins. The battle trials continued, with each team steadily trying to improve on the other's tactics. All Might was happy to see them taking notes, talking with their teammates, and sharing ideas around the room. Himiko and Sato took the field second after Kyoka and Izuku. They used Sato's strength bursts to move past clearings as quickly as possible, using the elements of surprise to get them in position to go for the bomb. They deployed a similar tactic as the first team, but Sato was able to run with the dumpster as a shield, with Himiko hiding inside, to get them in place to score a victory, with both of them alive at the end. Mina and Ajiro surprised people by not going the same route, but instead, Mina used her acid to cut through buildings, keeping them from having to take unnecessary risks by exposing themselves. The problem is that the process took time and drained Mina pretty bad by the time they had to make a break for the bomb. Also, Professor Shokin changed location, giving them a better view of the final approach. A bit of levity was added when Mina dove heroically in front of Ajiro, allowing him to secure the victory. All Might even allowed Mina to give her death speech before falling dramatically dead, and Ajiro screamed to the sky. Itsuka and Tenya took straight down Main Street using sheer speed and strength. It was a wicked, full-on assault that saw them achieve victory by Itsuka ripping car doors free for them to use as shields. They won with the fastest time. When Fumikage and Ochako took to the field, it was clever use of Dark Shadow and Ochako's gravity negation that saw them initially take to the roofs, forcing the professor to change location again and then drop to the streets. They made excellent use of elevation changes and Dark Shadow, making them extremely difficult to pinpoint. Ultimately, they won, with Ochako only having been hit once, when using her quirk made her unleash the rainbow. Denki was the sacrificial lamb in their assault. He did all he could to give Sue time to use her mobility to claim victory, including shorting out the power to the testing facility for 20 minutes. In his disoriented state, he was taken out of the match. Mezzo and Yuga were interesting in that they used Yuga to play counter-sniper. Mezzo would relay their opponent's position, and he would come out and fire his naval laser. His need to sparkle came in handy as his movements were not initially predictable, allowing him to avoid a few shots. In the end, the professor was a better shot, ending the Frenchman's assault and nearly taking out Mezzo. Shoto protected them with a wall of ice, and Koji swarmed their professor with rodents. They easily cruised to victory. Professor Shokan voiced their displeasure rather vehemently. Toru made it back just in time for her to join Momo. Did it work? Momo asked Toru. It is just a pair of bicycle shorts right now and a sports bra, Toru said excitedly. Hold on a moment. All Might. Yes, young Hagakure. He was surprised when she ran over and hugged him briefly. Thank you so much, Toru said quickly. I can't tell you how much it means to me too. Think nothing of it, young Hagakure, All Might said softly. As I said, it is my job to ensure that not only do I try to teach you how to be the best heroes you can be but that you are also adequately protected. Now take the field. Momo created some shields, but instead of handing one to Toru, she rigged them up on a pole so it looked like they were moving together. Toru crept straight down the middle, securing the victory. Mineta sighed as he was about to run alone when Izuku volunteered to go again. Why? Mineta asked as they walked out to the field. You came in clutch with that video in the locker room, Izuku said. When we told the class, you understood what we did to protect Eri. Family matters, Mineta said. Did they make you guys? Izuku nodded. Beep, that beeps. No offense, how are you both not homicidal psychopaths? Love is a mother beeper. Yo, Izuku said with a smile and shrug, making Mineta laugh. Hey, could we use your OBS to climb the buildings? Mineta nodded. Okay, I saw we go airborne till we get close, then dashed from both sides and see if we live. That is chaotic and wild, Mineta smiled. Let's do it. Once again, Izuku fell on the battlefield. Once they finished the scenario, they moved on to hand with Professor Quanon. The boys and some of the girls froze when she emerged. She wore a purple one-piece purplish-black bikini wrapped around her chest and neck, matching thigh-high boots, gloves, and a red sash around her slender waist. If I can get some of her blood, Himiko whispered to Izuku, who nodded foolishly. Welcome, my dear heroes, to hand-to-hand training, she smirked. Today, we will have some light sparring so I can see where some of you are and develop a lesson plan from there. I am also skilled in weapons and can provide you with training in that as well. I am not here to force my style on you but to help you find and develop your style. Itsuka and Izuku, you're up first. Itsuka smiled as they stepped into the ring, and so did Izuku. His excitement was building. No quirks, take your marks and begin. Izuku pushed off, coming in fast. Itsuka deflected his right hook, attempting to deliver a spinning kick to his midsection. She marveled as he spun back away from the kick, and with a spinning back fist, she was able to block, making her take a step back. The class watched as a devilish smile spread across both their faces. They raced in, ready to combat, only for their bodies to freeze up, and they fell to the floor. Light spar, Quanon called out, and they could move again. They both apologized sheepishly and began again. Once they were started, the professor got others going with some light sparring and others practicing striking. They were all battered when they moved on to quirk training with Professor Shiolanis. Everyone in the class was astonished when he moved effortlessly between them. He seemingly understood their quirks and had plans for them to work on strengthening them. Himiko and Izuku were shocked that he could even address their blood quirks. By the time he was done, the students were exhausted as they made their way to the showers. Toru and Himiko. Most girls had already slipped into the showers when Toru approached Himiko and got her attention. Himi, she said hesitantly. Himiko turned to the floating towel. Everything all right, Toru? Himi replied as she wrapped herself in a towel. Today, getting clothes so I didn't have to run around naked, it was something I had to come to terms with when I decided to become a hero. It wasn't the ideal situation. But today, when All Might sent me to get those clothes before the trial, Toru paused, struggling for a moment. I didn't realize how much it bothered me until I had them on. Just because we make peace with something doesn't mean it doesn't bother us, Himiko said, placing her hand on Toru's shoulder. What can I do to help? You don't get people's quirks when you transform into them, Himi nodded. Could you use it to transform into me? Himi could feel her shoulder tense. I want to see myself. I haven't seen myself since I was 5. If you don't. Himiko's heart broke some. Toru, I would love to help you out. She wrapped her arms around Toru. I can't imagine what this must have done to you. But you have gone through so much worse, Toru tried to complain as she returned the hug, some tears escaping. Just because we haven't gone through the same trauma, it doesn't minimize yours, Himiko said. Therapy has taught me that we all have our crosses to bear, and that doesn't make what you are going through any less traumatic for you. And if I can help you out. Thank you, Himi, Toru whispered. Himiko paused. I copy whatever you are wearing now, so I will just be in a towel. If you put on your uniform, we can even do a school photo for you, something nice you can send your parents. I want to see myself, all of myself, Toru blushed. Maybe we can do a school photo this weekend. Understandable, Himi smiled. I don't have my syringes right now, so I will have to take it the old-fashioned way. I can make a small cut or bite you. Is there a way you prefer? This is about what you are comfortable with, Himi responded. Biting is intimate for some people. How about we do a small cut? I promise it will be all right. I am extremely good with a knife. You can bite me, Toru said after a pause. You have shared so much with me, and knives scare me. You were also about to see me naked so that a little intimacy wouldn't bother me. Have you ever done that with Izuku? I mean, transform in the bedroom. Himiko laughed. No, we joke about it, but that would be a massive invasion of privacy. Now if they were in the bedroom with us, that would be a different story. Then that means you could turn into Izuku. Toru froze as the thought ran through her mind, and her whole body heated up. Naughty girl, Himi teased as they both laughed, their moods lightening. Now, let's shower together. She grabbed Toru's hand and led her into the shower. Himiko brought Toru's wrist to her mouth and slowly sank her fangs in. Toru was trembling slightly. When Himi's fangs sank in, there was a prick of pain, and then it just felt numb, but as Himiko drank, it sent a shudder through Toru. Himiko's eyes were lidded, and she seemed to be in pleasure. Hearing this deep throaty beep escape Himiko's throat as she held Toru's wrist did ignite some exciting thoughts in Toru's mind. As this was the most intimate act she had ever experienced, it was a bit of surprise at how much it turned Toru on. When Himiko broke away, Toru marveled that her wrist was sore. Did you like that? Himiko teased as she licked Toru's blood off her lips. Toru froze seeing the act, the sensual way that Himiko spoke, the way her tongue dragged seductively over her lips. I think I have a vampire fetish, Toru whispered, immediately clasping her hands over her mouth. Himiko laughed. Izuku was good at it as well. I just wish he had fangs like me. Toru nearly fell over at that part, but she managed to maintain control. Then, she watched as Himiko's skin began to morph and change. A short girl with long, messy, wavy chartreuse hair, pink specks, bushy eyelashes, and big round eyes appeared in place of Himiko. Her pupils were teal on the outside and yellow on the inside. Himiko disappeared quickly, and the new girl took her place. Toru was stunned as the towel fell. She just stared at her naked body, her eyes drinking in every detail. She reached out and touched Himi, her hands lightly tracing over her doppelganger's arms and sides. Himiko giggled, and a sensual beep escaped her lips as Toru's hand passed over her beeps. Toru was in a trance, staring at herself. She gently tugged Himiko's arm to get a complete look. Himiko sat with her back to Toru, looking over her shoulder at the invisible girl. When Himiko heard Toru begin to cry, she wrapped her in a tight embrace as they sank to the cool floor of the shower stall. Thank you, Himiko, Toru managed between the tears. Thank you so much. Anytime, Toru, Himiko said as she stroked Toru's head. Once Toru had composed herself, Himiko put the towel back on. I am going to go shower now. Are you good? Yes, thank you again, Toru said as her friend stepped out. Izuku and Shoto. Izuku had stepped out to pick up Eri from daycare, and he was surprised when Shoto asked if he could join him. Everything okay, Shoto? Izuku asked. Yes, Izuku, things are going well, Shoto responded. I was hoping to invite you to dinner tonight in the dorms. I am sure you must be exhausted. Fuyumi and my mother are preparing a feast to foster some goodwill between the class. It sounds good, Izuku responded with a smile. I am tired after today. Thankfully, except for Ida, most of the class is accepting. Those who are not don't understand the situation you have come from, Shoto said. Most would look at Fuyumi and myself and see that we are children of endeavor and assume that our home life was ideal, with us being afforded every opportunity to explore our quirks. That was not the case, Izuku said. Exactly. When you are in those moments, you feel alone, never thinking nor daring to dream that someone would dare to stand by your side. Shoto stopped walking, causing Izuku to do so as well. I want you to understand how much that day meant to me and my family. Whatever happens, know we are with you wherever you find yourself. He extended his hand. I will always come when you call. Izuku took Shoto by the forearm. I appreciate that, Shoto. I want you and your sister never to hesitate to call on Himiko or me. Maybe we can all go do something this weekend. I was about to suggest the aquarium, Shoto said unexpectedly. I have never been. It was one of the things I longed for, a sense of normalcy in my childhood. Eri and I have never been to an aquarium. Maybe Himi has. Izuku paused, hand to his chin. But we have never been together. I would love to share that memory with you. Then please allow us to pay for the tickets, Shoto said before Izuku could protest. This is what friends do, is it not? Izuku knew he was defeated. Then we will pay for lunch. Shoto smiled as they broke apart and continued to pick up Eri. Eri leapt into her father's arms, turned, and looked at Shoto. Have you come to admit that pancakes are superior to waffles? Quite the contrary, Shoto smirked. Not only are waffles superior, but I will contend that French toast is also superior to pancakes. How can you be so wrong? Eri said. Pancakes are amazing and work better with all kinds of fruit. They are a staple all over the world. Not only that, but some restaurants serve only pancakes. I dare you to find a waffle-only restaurant. Shoto smirked and pulled out his phone. I thought you would say such a thing. I present the Waffle Castle. They have 5 locations just in Tokyo alone and 18 across Japan. They are opening one here next month. I expect it as such. Eri crossed her arms and smirked. Father, phone. Eri took Izuku's phone, a quick search later. I give you the International House of Pancakes, in business for over 350 years, with 89,000 locations and a menu sporting over 187 pancakes. Shoto smiled. I see that you swayed Fuyumi to your side. She has come to her senses as soon as your mother, Eri said, sounding like an adult. Izuku made a note to pay more attention to her television programming. We shall see, Eri. This battle is not yet over. Shoto smiled. Izuku just enjoyed hearing them keep going back and forth as they headed back to the dorms. Bakugo. Why Katsuki? Mitsuki demanded. What in the world made you attack someone in the locker room? And why would you attack Izuku of all people? Katsuki clicked his tongue and looked away. No, Katsuki, you don't get to answer me, she said as the volume of her voice increased. You are lucky you are not in jail. Do you know how much your tuition is? Are you aware that it is non-refundable? WHO beeping cares you damn hag. Katsuki bellowed, getting to his feet. Don't you understand the more important thing is that he is still there, that damn villain is still in the hero course. How is Izuku a villain? What has he done? She retorted. He and that damn whore both have a blood quirk. You can't trust those people. He stomped his foot. Why can't anyone else see it? Mitsuki stopped. Is that why? Her tone was no longer angry. It was rife with disbelief. You are saying your hatred for Izuku is because he has a blood quirk. Not just any blood quirk. He steals other people's strength. He feeds on them like some vampire. Katsuki started to pace. Doesn't anyone get it? Mitsuki turned, stunned to her husband Masaru, who had been silent this entire time. Katsuki, he said, his voice calm. Katsuki stopped pacing and stared. You have chosen to attack another student based on their quirk. You don't. Masaru held up his hand to cut him off. Yes or no? Yes, Katsuki answered. Is there any evidence that when he uses his quirk, he weakens someone either at the time of usage or in some permanent manner afterward? Masaru said, his tone still calm and even. No, he saw Masaru raise an eyebrow. No, but I know it. Deep in my soul, I know he and that girl are in trouble. He is a villain, a killer, and a dangerous man. Katsuki, I don't know if a single word out of your mouth is true, but I will make an inquiry, Masaru said. But do you, instead of bringing this to the staff, choose to act violently and have been expelled from UA? Now tell me, what hero school is going to take you? Are you nuts? With my quirk, you attacked another hero course student because of the nature of their quirk. Masaru walked forward. No one is going to care about your damn quirk, you idiot. You are a quirkist, you idiot. Your dream of being a hero is for all intents and purposes over. Masaru grabbed Katsuki by his shirt. I am disgusted with you. Katsuki went to grab his father's hands, but when those words struck him as if he had been slapped. You have no idea what he has been through. And just because he has a blood quirk, you decide to sit in judgment. Who the hell do you think you are? You are some dumb kid. Who head was filled with this nonsense that somehow you are superior to others due to your quirk. Masaru's grip tightened and he lifted Katsuki off the ground. I don't know who filled your head with this nonsense, I don't beeping care. He dropped Katsuki, who fell to the ground. Get your shit unpacked and start filling out applications for a late enrollment. You will not leave this house without my or your mother's permission. Katsuki scrambled to his feet and started moving towards Masaru, who stopped and spread his arms. You better take your best shot and pray you put me down with it. Katsuki froze. He had never heard his father speak like that. Katsuki didn't move, and Masaru stepped out of the room. Your father, Mitsuki said. He wasn't always the same man you have known all your life. He changed when he found out I was pregnant with you. I don't know who filled your head with this nonsense, but I know I failed you. Katsuki looked at his mother, stunned, not only by her words but also by her tone and the hurt he heard. I am sorry, Katsuki, she said as she left the room. Katsuki sat on his bed and stared at the boxes in the corner. Fuyumi, she sat proudly as all the students in the dorm sat down to eat. She had prepared a menu of spaghetti with meatballs, salad, and bread. She watched as everyone passed the bowls around, and then they all turned and looked at her and Rei, waiting for them to serve themselves. Rei giggled as she had been distracted by Eri sitting between Rei and Himiko. Once they were served, Sato stood up. I would like to thank Ms. Fuyumi and Ms. Rei for preparing dinner for us tonight. He paused as the students all said their thanks. I would also like to say that I am happy that we all have a chance to sit together and eat. I hope that we can all do this again. He took his seat as everyone gave thanks for the meal, and they all began to eat. Despite the fatigue from the day, Fuyumi watched as most of the students smiled and laughed about their day in battle trial. She noticed her brother smiling and laughing as he talked with Izuku. She was excited when Shoto came home and told her about the trip to the aquarium, but he asked their mother if she would join them. Rei couldn't contain her happiness or excitement at the opportunity, especially when they heard Natsuo would also be there with the possibility of him bringing his mystery girlfriend along. Everything had not been perfect. There was a fight between Izuku and Tenya, who was absent from the dinner due to a family obligation. Then, there was the incident with Bakugo in the boys' locker room. She had been informed of his expulsion and had to watch as his parents came to pack up the boys' room this afternoon. It was a solemn affair. They didn't ask her many questions. All his mother asked was if any of the other students had been hurt. There was an energy coming off the boy's father, an energy that Fuyumi recognized. A storm raged underneath the surface. There was a fury there. At first, Fuyumi feared for Katsuki. But the more she studied Masaru Bakugo, the more she could feel the raging storm pass with every object he packed, with every box he carried to the elevator. She saw the storm of rage dissipate into disappointment with a hint of regret. As she watched, Masaru packed his boy's room, pausing and looking for every item as he packed it, questioning how everything had come to this. When they left, they thanked Fuyumi. She watched them talk with Aizawa and Midnight briefly before they left. Fuyumi shook the thought of the day away and focused on the dinner. When it was over, she was happy that some of the boys took to the dishes before the students had to break to tackle their homework. She watched as they crowded around the table, pulling out their notebooks. Rei took Eri to the common room to color and watch cartoons. She saw the class pulling around Himiko and Izuku, helping them with their homework. She had almost forgotten that they were behind academically compared to the rest of the class. Himiko and Izuku smiled as the class lent them aid. Momo sat between them. Momo was the #1 student in the class and seemed adept at teaching them. Soon, the raven-haired girl was floating around the table, offering her expertise to anyone who needed it. Fuyumi was watching the beginning of friendships blossom, the foundation of which would hold them for the rest of their lives. Tenya's family engagement. Tenya sat in his brother Tensai's office. It was easy to see that the two were related, as they looked remarkably similar, except that Tensai's hair was cut short and spiked. "Do you understand what you have done?" Tensai said as he paced the floor, the anger apparent in his voice. "I told you that information so you would be aware and to keep an eye on the situation, not to go running your mouth." "Tensai, I was telling them that they didn't belong in the UA and hoping that they would withdraw on their merit," Tenya said in an attempt to defend themselves. "And I told you to keep it yourself," Tensai said. "I told you just so you were aware. The principal of UA gave them this deal. Do you not understand what your fever had done?" "No brother," Tenya said. Tensai grabbed a paper off his desk and shoved it toward Tenya. He took it and began reading. As he started reading, the color drained from his face. Due to his actions, Tensai received an official sanction from the Hero Commission. Every member of the Ingenium Agency would have to undergo training about handling classified information. The final thing that caught his attention was the 3 million yen fine that had to be paid to the Midoriyas. Tensai, once his brother had finished reading the letter, then explained to Tenya that because of this official reprimand against not only him, he was going to remove him from the ability to participate in higher-profile cases for the next 5 years. Tenya's carelessness had hurt the agency's growth, the ability to hire new sidekicks, and even take on interns. Tensai, aka Ingenium, was known for the number of sidekicks he employed, numbered in the 60s. Tenya knew his brother took pride in taking on sidekicks and finding their roles within the agency. If you had a speed quirk, you knew you would find a spot at the Ingenium Agency. Tensai was proud of the 4 heroes who had started with him and had moved on to begin their agencies. They would call for advice or assistance. Tensai was there for them. "Do you understand now that your inability to keep your mouth shut has done?" Tensai said as he slammed the paper on his desk. "But brother, he killed that man while he was in custody," Tenya said, getting to his feet. "I was there, Tenya," Tensei barked. "I helped take him into custody. I am the one who told you about what he did. I told you that so you could watch him and ensure they behaved. Did I ask you to do anything other than that?" "No," Tenya said as he hung his head. "Do you know why?" Tenya shook his head. "Because they gave me the file afterward. They read me in on what had happened and what had been done. Now, because of your actions, this." He snatched the paper off the desk. "Brother," Tenya protested, stepping forward. "Get out, Tenya, get out and keep your mouth shut before you cause any more harm," Tensai said, not turning around. Tenya hung his head as he walked out, heading downstairs to the waiting car that would take him back to UA. Fuyumi Todoroki had woken up early. She noticed her pants felt a bit tighter lately. Her exercise routine since the escape from Endeavor had been practically non-existent. Living with many young, healthy female heroines in training made her self-conscious. Even the thicker girls, Mina and Ochako, were thicker in all the right places, unlike Fuyumi, who was getting soft in the wrong place, namely her stomach. She had decided that she was going to do something about it. While she pulled on her leggings, she had also been trying to tackle the question of her future. She had earned her teaching degree and was getting her intern hours, which she loved. She enjoyed working with children, especially the younger ones. Working at UA had opened her eyes to the fact that there was a certain degree of luck involved in these students making it, and not just the lottery of their quirk, though that did play a large part. The lottery of their upbringing, of having parents and family that supported them. She heard some students discussing hardships due to their quirks, viewed as villainous or less than ideal. But there was more than that she had heard about. Even those with powerful quirks and strong abilities who had struggled with control had struggled to find that control. Unless you came from money or the home of a pro hero, a training space was unlikely. These students had broken laws in attempts to practice and train. Ochako had talked about sneaking into condemned buildings or construction yards to practice her quirk. Then she thought of Katsuki Bakugo. He had such a powerful quirk, a massive potential for heroic work or villainy, a push one way or the other. His biggest enemy was himself, but it was complicated by those around him who either looked the other way or encouraged such behavior, leading him down the road of intolerance and gross stupidity. Children needed guidance and someone to step in and help them. A gentle nudge or hand could make all the difference. Maybe Fuyumi couldn't be a heroine. She loved children and could help protect them. Use her family name to her advantage. The sun had yet to rise as she stepped outside the 1A dorms. The campus was quiet. Everyone was still asleep, wrapped in their blankets, engulfed in what she hoped were good dreams. She was stretching when the sound of someone's feet striking the pavement caught her attention. She looked on the outskirts of the trail that ran outside the dorms. She saw Izuku running, bare-chested. She noticed he would close his eyes for several steps. What grabbed her attention beyond the handsome, toned, chiseled body was the smile on his face. He had this look of pure joy on his face. The only time she had ever seen him that happy was when he was in the company of Himiko and Eri. But this was different. This was a personal joy, a sense of freedom. He looked so beautiful, handsome, and positively enchanting. She felt a brief swell of lust as he ran out of view. She shook her head and slapped her cheeks. Bad Fuyumi, she thought. She started running along the inner course, music playing on her headphones. She ran, letting her mind drift to thoughts of yesterday and tomorrow, of what she wanted for herself, of the mark she wanted to leave behind. Such thoughts and ideas were hard as they were foreign to her. Most of the time, she had spent thinking of her family and siblings and trying to help them survive in their father's household. Rarely had she thought of herself, focusing on the needs of others, even the thoughts she was focusing on of trying to leave a mark. Leaving a legacy, was it for herself or others? Having constantly thought of others, thinking of herself made her feel a bit guilty, selfish somewhat. As she ran, she saw him with that same look on his face, the smile that wouldn't quit, and every time she saw it, it made her heart skip a beat. He looked like a completely different person. She had seen when they arrived at the campus, from the fight with Ida to the night before at dinner. When she had reached her limit, she came across him again. He was in the middle of his cool-down walk. He spotted her and walked over. "Good morning," he said, a greeting that she mimicked. Her curiosity had gotten better, so she had to ask him. "I saw you running, and you had this look." She smiled at Izuku's blush. "You looked so happy. I don't mean to pry, but unless you were with Himiko or Eri, I have never seen you look like that." But even then, this was different. Izuku looked down. As he looked back up, she felt his gaze drift over her body, a feeling she didn't dislike. "When we were in the pit, do you remember what I said about my idea of heaven?" he said. How could Fuyumi forget? It was the most beautiful, romantic thing she had ever heard. A man saying that to her would need an IV when she was done. Your idea of heaven was watching Himiko and Eri play under the blue sky. A sentiment you understand, he said, catching her off guard. Shoto didn't see it, but I did that first time we met. You were willing to die that day if it meant he was free. All Fuyumi could do was nod. The private thing I dreamed of, just for myself, was to run. I would dream and fantasize about being able just to run. I don't understand, she said. Most of my life, the outside was a fantasy, aside from faded memories of my mother, he said. Being locked up most of my life, I dreamed of running, the freedom of it, the wind across my face. He looked at the brightening horizon. The thought of it held this magical allure, he said. If I could run under the open sky, I would be free. When I run, I am free. That is kind of beautiful, Fuyumi said. Why don't you, Himi, and Eri come over for breakfast? Sure, Izuku started walking away but stopped. Fuyumi, would you care to come running with me tomorrow? That sounds nice, Fuyumi said. Rei was overjoyed at the prospect of breakfast with her children and the Midoriyas, mainly little Eri. She was not expecting to see Eri and Shoto pouting about breakfast before them. After some coaxing, it was due to the lack of pancakes, according to Eri, and waffles, according to Shoto. Her daughter's attempt to avoid conflict had left them both feeling sullen. Rei's inquiry then sparked the debate over the superior breakfast item, with each attempting to sway Rei to their side. She looked to the others for advice and was instead met with teasing smiles. Then Rei committed the most grievous of folly when she confessed to not liking either that much as she didn't like sweet breakfast items instead of savory. Eri and Shoto both looked betrayed as if she were an alien. The look was so bizarre that Rei couldn't help but burst out laughing. Eri and Shoto started pouting. Fuyumi, Izuku, and Himiko started to laugh, becoming a vicious circle. The laughter from the kitchen was a siren song to more students as they drifted down to start their day. For some, it was an easy transition from the night before. Momo came down and asked Himiko and Izuku for their homework so she could review it. With how they sat watching her look over their work, one would have expected they were before a firing squad. Watching Momo point out some corrections before telling them the good job was heartwarming. The smiles on their faces as they asked some questions for clarification and Momo offered her future assistance made the couple look visibly relieved. Tenya Ida came downstairs to the thunderous cacophony of laughter and morning joy. He saw Izuku smiling and talking with Momo, oblivious to the trouble and chaos he had brought. He wanted to leap off the stairs and pummel Izuku into submission. His brother's words were still ringing in his ears. Maybe I could get him to withdraw the complaint, he thought. Mina, Toru, and Himiko departed to take Eri to school, sparking everyone else's exodus. Fuyumi even excused herself, leaving Rei alone. Rei was washing dishes, humming an ancient tune to herself, absently lost in her little world. It was a tune her grandmother would sing in the kitchen with a little Rei running around underfoot. The same tune she would hum or occasionally sing throughout her life was soothing for Rei. This was one of those moments associated with happier and better times. Freedom meant she was allowed to dream and make those better memories. It was building a metaphorical new foundation for her and her children. But in moments like these, no matter how pleasant, there was a bit of loneliness when she returned to her home on campus, at night when she would stare out. She sighed internally, chastising herself for being so greedy. She had her children back and was working on a relationship with Shoto. All she could ask for was the ability to travel or raise the dead so she could have her beloved Tuya back. But of all these friends and lovers, no one compares with you. And these memories lose meaning when I think of love as something new. A woman's voice sang the lines from behind Rei, startling her. Standing behind Rei was one of the professors, Professor Shokin, to be exact, a woman with a curvy body and long black hair with scattered dark purple streaks. She often ties her hair in a ponytail, with two full shoulder-length strands framing her face. Her eyes are black with purple flecks. Rei hadn't had a chance to meet the woman, only a brief introduction as Shokin walked out the door. Rei had met every other professor, but Shokin seemed to be avoiding her, and when Rei did see her, the professor would ignore Rei or leave the room. "Professor," a startled Rei said, her hand over her heart. "I am sorry I didn't hear you come in." Rei expected the Shokin to say something, but instead, the professor just stared at Rei, looking her over, through her, taking the measure of her. "Not many people know that song," Rei said, feeling a bit nervous, but she didn't feel threatened. She felt safe and protected. "How do you know it?" "I know it from my grandmother. Back in school, there was a girl ahead of me," Shokin said as she slowly moved forward. "I thought she was very cool. She had this air about her, was very nice, and had helped me out when I messed up something during sports day." Rei looked intently at the woman's features. "She was a mentor to me, helped me find my footing, helped me study, she always made time for me. I would follow her everywhere, try to do my hair like her, and watch the same shows. I guess you could say I was smitten. A case of puppy love." Shokin smiled. "I don't think she ever noticed, not that I said anything or gave her the dozens of letters I wrote her telling her how I felt." Shokin was getting very close to Rei. I would tell myself tomorrow, or maybe at the bonfire, or think about getting up on stage and shout it out. But she would always hum that song. It was like her personal theme song. I noticed she would hum it when she was off in her little world or felt nervous. It would soothe her. Shokin looked around as if she was about to tell a secret. She would sing the words when she was happy, just quietly, to herself, and she would do this little dance. Rei's eyes were watering as she knew the woman standing before her. She couldn't stop giggling, watching Shokin mimic Rei's little dance. I even learned how to play the song on guitar. Shokin blushed. Not good, mind you, but well enough. I would think about going to her house and singing it outside her window. One time I even got as far as her block before I ran back home. Shokin was directly before Rei now. Then she was gone. Just like that, Shokin snapped her fingers. We heard that she had married a big-time hero, and he came in and swooped her up into the happy ever after of every fairy tale you could dream of. But I never forgot about her or that song. I would sing it to myself when I would think about her. Or when I did well on a test or was nervous about something. Shokin tilted her head slightly. I promised myself that I didn't care if she was married, a villain, whatever, that one day I would see her again and tell her, Rei Himura, I have been in love with you since that sports day. I don't know if you feel the same about me, but I want to be a part of your life. Having you in my life makes it better. It inspires me to be better, and even when it was the darkest, you were the light I held close to my heart. Kana, Rei whispered as he pulled Professor Shokin, aka Kana Tsutsumi, aka the deceased Lady Nagant, into a tight hug. I don't know if. Shish, Kana said. This is good enough for now, Rei. Mr. and Mrs. Midoriya. They both shared a collective headache, and that headache's name was school. Himiko and Izuku were behind in schoolwork. They had studied hard and worked diligently to pass the entrance exam. They had succeeded but not my wild metrics, but they had passed. They had learned to answer the questions on the test, but the lack of prior knowledge was coming into play. They could answer the question, but the building blocks that got them there were outside their preview. It was like studying to give a speech in a foreign language. They could give the speech flawlessly, and they may even know what the words meant, but having a conversation or using different tenses of the words was out of the question. As they listened to their professors and stared at the textbooks, both felt that each subject was a foreign language that they only had a passing knowledge of. Coupled with the conditions of their parole, they were expected to maintain a certain GPA. So, the feeling of pressure was mounting. This wasn't something they could fight their way out of. Himiko was thankful that, while Momo, Itsuka, and Shoto looked to have things well in hand, she could see that Mina, Toru, and Eijiro had a headache as they walked toward the lunchroom. Are you all right, my friend? Shoto said, placing a hand on Izuku's shoulder. Izuku nodded. There were just many things I didn't understand. I don't have the whole story, but I must tell you how it ends. I understand. Shoto smiled. I would be willing to offer my assistance if you require it. That would be greatly appreciated. Izuku laughed. Maybe you can have Fuyumi explain it to me like I am in primary school so I understand it better. Do not fret, my friend. I believe I can secure you some crayons, Shoto retorted, forcing Izuku to laugh. I will help you, too, Itsuka added, giving him a shoulder bump. He gave her a grateful smile and brushed his hand against hers. I won't let you drown either, Izuku, Kyoka said from the other side. You are not alone anymore. You got some backup. That you do, Shoto added. Momo laughed as Toru, Mina, and Himiko hit her with the big kitty's eyes, asking her to help them. By the time they made it to the table, there was a large study group being hammered out, with Momo promising to make sure none of her new friends would be left behind. The way that Momo said it was adorable. There was this hesitation as she said the word friend, but when she was embraced in a group hug from the three little lost cats she blushed and looked incredibly happy. It helped with the day's uneasiness. After lunch, when classes resumed, it was a bit easier to digest the things thrown their way, knowing that while they may not understand everything, they had people willing to help them. Izuku and Himiko were walking to pick up Eri. There were plans in place for them to go to the dorms to start getting some tutoring from their friends, but the couple was talking about attending some after-school lessons with Midnight and Aizawa, as the two professionals had sent them a message offering their services. Who would we trust to babysit Eri, though? Izuku said that as their schedule was booking up quickly, alongside the extra studying they needed, there was training and working out. All our friends are in the same boat as us. They are out of the question, Himiko said, taking Izuku's arm and snuggling in. Maybe Midnight might be able to help, or what about Rei? She is fond of Eri, and Eri seems to like her. We can't take advantage of her, though, Izuku replied. Maybe we could offer to pay her. I think we can offer something. I must consider the budget. I don't want to cut what we are saving by too much, Himiko said. I wanted to ask you something, Izuku said, giving Himiko his full attention. Do you have any idea where that sizable deposit came from? No, Izuku shook his head. I haven't looked at the account in a while. It was 3 million yen, Himiko said. How much? Izuku stammered. There has to be an error of some sort. We should talk to Aizawa about it, maybe he knows. But don't spend any of it just in case we have to pay it back. I wasn't about to spend it, though aside from pretentious things, I couldn't think of anything off the top of my head to spend 3 million yen on. Himiko laughed. But what? Izuku said, looking at his wife dubiously. If we do get to keep it, maybe we can put some aside for Christmas and stuff and put some in savings, but I want to invest the rest, maybe, Himiko said. Neither of us know anything about investing, Izuku said. Yes, but Momo and Nezu do, Himiko said. We could always see if they could point us in the right direction. It will just be something that will take care of us or Eri later. Himiko took his hand. I don't want us running around being heroes our whole lives. I want a life, to raise our babies, and to make sure they are taken care of, especially if one of us gets hurt or. Nope, Izuku said, kissing her cheek. I don't want to think about that. Neither do I, my love, Himiko wiped the stray tear from her eye. I don't want to imagine a life without you, but if something happens to us, the other has to press on for Eri. Okay, I get it, Izuku said. I don't like it, but I understand. For Eri, they said as they approached the school. They paused at the fence, watching Eri running around with the other kids, laughing and playing. The simple, pure innocence and joy were heartwarming and all the motivation they needed to keep fighting for their tomorrow. Private study session. Izuku was not quite sure how he ended up in Itsuka's room. It was not that he minded it, they were going over the English lit assignment from Present Mike. They were seated at a small table on the floor in her room. She was sitting next to him, pointing something out. He was having difficulty concentrating. She had changed out of her uniform and was in a pair of cloth shorts and a loose shirt that hung off her shoulder. A tantalizing view of a black bra strap was the culprit of stealing his gaze at first. It had started simply with them going over the assignment. Still, she leaned over the table, and the loose shirt fell open, revealing a remarkable peek at the orbs hidden beneath. So now he had black lace to complete his imagination and fuel the fire of whether her underwear matched and what style they may be. So, English lit homework was much more complicated than it should have been, as she unconsciously teased him. A tuck of her hair, tucking of one leg under her chin, the stretch above her head that lifted her shirt exposing her luscious abs. Izuku felt thirsty and was getting thirstier by the second. Now she was next to him, her hair off to the side, her tender neck exposed, her perfume filling his nose. Her soft words drifted in one ear and out the other. Itsuka was not flying blind. She had engineered all of this to entice Izuku. She knew what she was doing and ensured he caught glimpses and hints. She was using every tool in her arsenal. When she slowly turned to face him, his eyes were on her and not their homework. She felt her heart skip a beat. She could see him looking from her eyes to her lips. When he slowly leaned in, she closed her eyes, welcoming the contact of his lips to hers. His hand was on her cheek as she turned to deepen their kiss. She started to gently pull him to the floor, pulling him down on top of her, his body resting in between her legs. The intimate position added gasoline to the fire that was already burning between them. His hand caressed her thigh, lifting her leg to wrap around his hip. She almost whimpered when he broke the kiss but instead bit her lip to contain the beep when he began to kiss and beep at her neck. Instinctively, she had her legs wrapped around him as small jolts of pleasure ran through them and their hips rocked against each other. Itsuka could feel his erection straining against his clothes, and he could feel how badly she wanted him by the motion of her hips. He grabbed the hem of her shirt, and in one deft motion, it was pulled over her head and tossed aside. She undid the tie from his uniform and nearly broke the buttons on his shirt, freeing him from his clothes. She blushed as his eyes were on her lace-clad chest. As his hand slid lightly up her stomach, she shuddered and pulled his hips tight against her. She gasped when she grabbed the clasp, and her beeps came free of their lace prison. She wiggled and writhed under him as they kissed, and his hand fondled her beep, playing and teasing her erect nipples. She broke the kiss, and his name escaped her lips in a pleading tone. He kissed her jawline and down her neck, moving ever closer to where she wanted his mouth. Her eyes closed as a deep throaty beep filled the room as his mouth closed over her nipple. With each swirl and flick of his tongue, she beeped his name, calling to him not to stop his actions, encouraging him more as he switched to the next beep. She reached down and rubbed his hard cock through his pants. Fumbling her way, she freed him, taking it in her hand. She began to stroke him up and down to his delight. His simple beeps of encouragement were all she needed. She felt his hand trail down her stomach, dance playfully across her abs. Then it was at the inside of her thigh as she opened her legs for him. She felt the fabric of her shorts shift to the side as his hand found the outside of her panties. She blushed at how her desire had already made a mess of her underwear. He pushed the damp fabric aside and began to lightly touch her wet beep. As she continued to stroke his cock, their beeps became louder as they brought each other closer to release. The way he fondled her clit was nearly enough to break her. She nearly screamed when his fingers slipped inside of her. She could hear him playing with her dripping beep. She listened to his beeps in her ear, begging her not to stop, that he was almost there. The way he called her name and the attention he was paying to her. Not just mindlessly fingering her, but his other hand was at her side, caressing her hip and legs, squeezing her beeps. They kissed. He nibbled on her neck and shoulder. He was worshipping her body like she was a goddess. His appreciation of her brought her to that edge as he called for her again, the whispered cry of his impending release. "Come for me, Izuku. I want to feel you come," she begged him. Her words sent him over the edge. He called her name as his orgasm rocked his body. He struggled to keep pleasing her. She felt his cum splash against her stomach. She felt the tension in her body begin to tremble, and she felt a scream about to escape her lips. She bit down on his shoulder, as waves of pleasure rocked her. She clung to him desperately, afraid that if she let go, she would drown in pleasure. This wasn't the first time that Itsuka had felt an orgasm, but it was the first time that it had been brought on by someone else. The difference was noticeable. Her toes curled so hard she feared they would break, and her senses of the room were gone, as she could feel his body against her, hear his words and beeps. Nothing else mattered or existed. She twitched and spasmed against his hand as the storm of pleasure assaulted her body and senses. She bucked violently as she clung to him, and with each crash of the wave, it lessened, bringing her back to her senses. She was finally able to fall back. She found his eyes staring down at her. The look of caring and lust wormed its way deep into her soul. She pulled him down into a tender but passionate kiss. "Is this enough for now?" she whispered. "I was afraid I had pushed too far," he said. "I got so swept up in you." She smiled. "I would have told you no. I wanted you. I wanted this." They cleaned up and put back on their shirts. She pinned him to the door, stealing another kiss as they said goodnight. She felt like she was floating as she made her way to her bed and off to dreamland. As Izuku was walking across the lawn towards his home, he was passed by a blushing Mina, who looked at him and giggled. "See you tomorrow, Mina," he said. "Yeah, tomorrow," she whispered. He found Himiko sitting on the couch, looking quite happy with herself. "That girl can kiss," Himiko said with a Cheshire-type grin. Izuku smirked, then walked over, lifting Himiko. He threw her over his shoulder and slapped her on the butt. "Sounds like you have been quite the naughty girl," he said. Himiko went to protest, but a quick smack across her ass turned her protest into a beep. "I think you need to be disciplined." Himiko let out a beep of desire. "Yes, I do. I was very naughty. Please teach me a lesson. Make me a good girl." The day had begun like all the others. Himi and Izuku had dropped Eri off at school and made their way to class. albeit with a slight detour by a new coffee cart that had opened up. They arrived in class and greeted friends and classmates before the day began. Today was going to be special rescue training, so after they all changed into costumes, they were on the bus riding toward the unforeseen simulation joint or USJ. The conversation was lively. Himiko constantly teased Mina, which had the girl blushing. Itsuka tried to remain calm as Izuku's hand traced small circles on her inner thigh. Dancing delicately higher, but not too high, just enough to tease. He maintained a conversation with Shoto the entire time about a trip to the aquarium over the weekend as calmly as possible. When Shoto turned around, he leaned over and whispered in her ear about studying some more later and nipped her ear, making her cover her mouth to hide her beep. She didn't even realize she had opened her legs wider till his hand found its way over her beep. Her eyes went wide. She closed her legs quickly. She wanted to kiss him so badly that when the bus disembarked, she made sure they were the last to do so and claimed her kiss. "You are a very naughty man," she whispered. "You are a very beepy woman," he replied. They made their way with the rest of the class. They got a good laugh at how excited Ochako was to meet 13. It was shaping up to be a good day. The first week was coming to an end. Their past was in the open, so their classmates were free to make their own decisions. Bakugo had been expelled, Himi and Eri were happy, and he was pleased. This new life was going well. Aside from when the press had broken one of the gates a few days ago, everything was going well. Momo and Eijiro had been voted class presidents, and Izuku's name had been mentioned. However, he had been able to talk his way out of the nomination, citing that he was still behind academically and his family that trying to do more was too much for him. Izuku nominated Eijiro, citing his actions during the locker room brawl, in which he stepped in and did all he could to stop it from escalating. Most of the boys voted for him. He barely lost to Momo by a few votes, and one of those votes was his own. Aizawa was annoyed when he saw that All Might was missing. He pulled 13 aside to find out he was running late and would not join them that day. After a brief talk from 13 about the focus of their training today, they were all led into the USJ. They arrived at the plaza and were getting their team assignments when Eijiro noticed the portals calling it out to the teachers. Everyone froze when the man who identified himself as Shigaraki stepped out. The hair on the back of Izuku and Himiko's neck stood up. He was a killer, and they knew it before he opened his mouth. A slim man with pale skin, tinged gray. He was wearing plain red sneakers, black pants that exposed his ankles, and a matching long-sleeved V-neck shirt. Covering his arms and shoulders were what appeared to be hands. A hand was attached to his face, acting as a mask. The wildness of his eyes conveyed everything Izuku and Himiko needed to know about him. They would have been nervous if he had been alone, but he wasn't, and that made it feel like they were in the pits again. His second, who seemed responsible for the portals, was a man whose entire body was made out of a dark purple mist, save for his glowing yellow eyes. He wore an exquisite suit with a tie and had a metal brace from around his collarbone to just below his eyes. The third scared them. It was a giant, black humanoid monster with a very muscular body and many scars. His brain is exposed on the top of his head while his large eyes surround it. He has a beak-like mouth with an array of sharp teeth. It only wore beige pants and metal knee pads designed to emulate skulls. His feet and torso are left bare. The way it moved was what set off their alarm bells. It was almost like it was trying to walk like a person, a monster who wasn't human trying to mimic what a human would move like. "I am Shigaraki of the League of Villains," the slim man proclaimed. "We have come here to kill All Might," but he seemed strangely absent. "Instead, we shall summon the raid boss with screams of these useless mobs before us." 13. "Get the students out of here," Aizawa shouted. "I will hold them back." "Sensei," Izuku yelled. "I understand, Izuku. Retreat and get the class to safety, that is an order," he said as he leapt over the railing. Izuku ground his teeth, but he did as he was told. The class followed 13, only to be cut off when the mist villain appeared. 13 tried to use her quirk, but he turned it around on her, tearing open the back of her suit. Denki was trying to raise the school with the communicator built into his costume, but he told them he was being jammed. Eijiro and Mezzo launched an attack only to be swallowed up by a portal. He saw Ochako rush to 13, and he went to help her as there was no way they could leave their teacher behind. He didn't see the one open under him before it was too late. He also saw Himiko falling into a portal. They reached for each other but grabbed nothing but air. Izuku. Everything was dark, and then suddenly, he was falling. He was over a destroyed cityscape. Thankfully, he was falling at an angle and not to the street below, where he would make a nice splat on the pavement. Not that landing wouldn't hurt, but at least he would live. Rolling with the impact the best he could, he tumbled across the roof before stopping against the ledge. Making sure nothing was broken, he got to his feet. If they wanted them dead, then why didn't they drop them outside over nothing, he thought. None of them could fly. Maybe Ochako could have saved some of them, Momo a few more if she could make some parachute, but other than that, they would have been dead. They must have something else in mind. Get him, he heard from the alley below. Izuku looked over the ledge and saw Koji holding his arm, being pursued by 3 thuggish-looking male villains. They were all dressed somewhat similarly in loose-fitting jeans, white shirts, and yellow bandanas. The one in the lead had these black spikes poking out of his body. Izuku watched as he extended his arm and fired off toward Koji, who barely rounded the corner to avoid being hurt. The second one leapt to the side of the building and ran along it. The third hand's skin began to peel away, revealing jagged bone fingers that extended into hideous-looking claws. Izuku ran to the other side. Seeing a fire escape, he descended as quickly as possible, leaping down the steps to the landing below. Koji, round the corner coming towards him, saw Wall Runner come around just shortly after him. Izuku dove from the second-floor landing, tackling him off the wall and into a pile of trash below. Koji spun around as Spike came into view. He panicked momentarily before he dove for cover to avoid another shot. Izuku quickly grabbed Wall Runner's face, fish-hooking him, and yanked his head to the side. He brought his bladed gauntlet across the man's face, cutting it open. The man yelled in pain as Izuku took some of his blood and activated his quirk. Wall Runner landed a rigid rib shot to get away. Spike turned towards Izuku, ready to shoot, only to be speared away by Koji, who came barreling in like a missile. Koji began to strike at anything he could target when he was unable to avoid getting shot in the arm, forcing him to fall away in pain. Bone Claw was next. Izuku barely managed to dodge back away from the attack. Wall Runner kicked him in the back of the knee, sending him down. Izuku rolled to the side to avoid a downward swipe from Bone Claw, sweeping his legs and sending him down. As Bone Claw scrambled, Koji lifted his heavy foot across the villain's hand, snapping the claws. Izuku kicked Spike in the gut and blocked another kick from Wall Runner. Koji grabbed Bone Claw off the ground and hurled him into the wall. Izuku's bladed gauntlet cut down Spike's chest, drawing blood from the villain. He added the villain's strength to his own. Bone Claw staggered to his knees somehow, only for Koji to knee him in the head, trapping it between his knee and the wall, sending the villain down. Wall Runner tried to tackle Izuku in the back, but Izuku only staggered. Now, having the strength of Wall Runner and Spike, he turned and grabbed Wall Runner, tossing him away. Koji grabbed the unconscious Bone Claw and threw him at Spike, sending that villain down again. Izuku took the opportunity to add Bone Claw blood as he ran and punted Wall Runner in the head, sending him down. Spike kicked Koji's leg out, sending him down. He got to his feet and didn't even see Izuku come from the side and hit him with a clean shot to the jaw. Another kick to the head ended the skirmish. Izuku pulled Koji to his feet. "Damn good job," he said. "May I?" he said, pointing at the wound on Koji's shoulder. Koji just gave him a thumbs up before looking away before Izuku took some of his blood. Izuku's eyes widened at how strong Koji was. His classmate was much stronger than anyone would have given him credit. He looked big and strong, but how he carried himself carried such a gentle giant to another level. Izuku looked at the downed villains. He didn't know when they would get up. "Help me get them into a dumpster," Izuku said as they dumped them in, locked the lid in place, knocked it on its side, and pushed it up against the wall. "Toru," Koji said suddenly, grabbing Izuku's arm and pointing out of the alley. "Let's go. Lead the way," Izuku said. "Mountain Zone." Kyoka jammed her jacks into her attacker's eyes as she kicked him away, she scrambled to her feet as another one tackled her back down. Clawing at her, she yelled when the villain grabbed her jacks in one hand and yanked her head back, his fist colliding with her face, cutting her scream short. She tried desperately to get to her feet, but he was too heavy. She felt his hand clawing at her waistband, and she let her jacks extend and roll onto her back. She placed her hands on his face and dug her thumbs into his eye sockets. He screamed, letting go of her jacks. She didn't stop sending them as deep as she could into his ears, shattering his eardrums and pumping her racing heartbeat into his head. The first attacker came at her. She slipped past him, tripping him. She grabbed a fist-size rock and slammed it into the side of his head. When he still moved, she did it again until he stopped. She stumbled off of him, hearing the sounds of fighting. Not too far, she heard Momo yell out and scream in pain at someone. Kyoka raced towards her classmate. She was whirled and barely managed to move out of a knife swipe. It tore through her shirt and left a cut on her stomach. She fell to a knee. The villain reversed their grip on the knife and went to fall upon her with a maniacal look in their eyes. Suddenly, Denki came barreling from the side, spearing them away. They rolled across the ground while Denki's quirk was not very accurate at range, but with his hands on their opponent, he couldn't miss. Kyoka had been alone when she first landed and was immediately set upon by their attackers. She was thankful that she wasn't alone as everything was washing over her. One villain set upon doing something unspeakable, while another just wanted to kill her. She found Momo worried that she was in a similar situation. Momo had a baton in one hand and a cattle prod in the other. One villain lay at her feet, and another cradled a broken arm. Kyoka came around the corner as a female villain with wispy white hair ran towards Momo. She watched as Momo swung. The villain seemed ghostly and passed through the attack unharmed, kicking Momo in the chest and sending her down. The man, cradling his arm, tried to press the advantage, but Kyoka ran and shoulder-blocked him, sending him crashing down. Momo got to a knee and extended the cattle prod as Ghost passed through it, but Momo rolled to her side to avoid the attack. Kyoka spun at the sound of footsteps racing towards them to see 7 more villains round a corner. The girls began to panic as their avenue of escape was cut off. Ghost came at Momo again. Momo was on her feet, and this time, when she jabbed the cattle prod, she jumped back and held the baton out. When Ghost materialized, the baton was in front of her. A terrible scream echoed off the mountain wall. Kyoka landed a kick to the villain, who had talked ribs, as she backed towards Momo. Momo drove the cattle prod to the back of Ghost's neck, knocking the villain out and cutting off her screams. Momo handed Kyoka the cattle prod as a staff came to her hands. They both took a deep, calming breath as they prepared to fight. When suddenly, Denki came tumbling over the rocks, holding his arm as blood ran freely. He dived to the side, and a muscular villain dived after him with large curved blades all over his body. Denki was in between the group and the girls. "Denki, give them everything you got," Momo shouted. Denki blinked. He hoped Momo had a plan, but he knew she must have. She saw her chest glow as he let loose his 1.5 million indiscriminate shock. Momo pulled an insulated blanket over her and Kyoka as the screams of their attackers filled the air. Once it stopped, they threw it off. Seeing Denki stumble around and their attackers down, they dared to take a breath. The ground erupted from under Denki, and out rose a man, bare-chested, his body covered in electrical burns. A shadow fell over the girls, and they dove apart as another villain came crashing down where they were. He rose out his lower half and was a metal drill. He spun out of the hole, and the girls readied their weapons. "Surrender or your friend dies," the one holding Denki said. They saw him holding a large knife to Denki's throat. When they didn't immediately move, he pressed the blade, drawing some blood. Kyoka and Momo dropped their weapons. From around the corner came a third villain who was cut up, but he had a satisfied grin. He wore a pair of garish tight metallic silver pants and a matching vest. He seemed to be tucking himself back into his pants as he approached the corner. He was holding a bandage to his side. Momo's hand glowed from behind Kyoka's back, and she felt a small, thin stiletto knife in her hand. "Already," Burns said. "You know that maniac doesn't hesitate," Drill said. "Yeah, well," she put on a tough front, "got a good cut in, Maniac said, standing next to Burns. Cute little ash blonde, whole vampire gimmick, but she was crying. The other two are finishing her off right now, he laughed, running his thumb across his neck. She kept crying for some douche named Izuku. It was pretty beeping funny. I wonder who these two fine pieces of meat will cry for. He licked his lips. Momo and Kyoka immediately fought back tears, thinking of what horrible fate had befallen Himiko. They pushed down the bile, thinking of what these pieces of trash had in store for them. Drill, tie them up, Burns ordered. Stupid children, what made you think we would let your friend live? Suddenly, a knife was in Maniac's hand, and he spun and stabbed into the side of Burns' throat and ripped it across as he pulled the knife against Denki's throat away. Kyoka and Momo didn't question it. Kyoka leapt and drove the stiletto into Drill's shoulder blade. Momo grabbed the cattle prod and shoved it into the villain's mouth, making him scream around the device. Kyoka fell away, holding the baton and whirling to find Maniac, but she saw the skin begin to bubble, turn into a green sludge, and fall away, revealing Himiko. Himiko! The two girls yelled. They did their best not to vomit seeing the nearly decapitated villain lying on the ground dead. Himiko fell to the knee, holding her side. Momo created bandages, noticing the blood seeping through her fingers. You need to cauterize it, Himiko said. Silver nitrate, can you make silver nitrate? Momo nodded, and metal zip ties fell from Momo. Kyoka, secure the villains and let us know if someone is approaching, she said as a vial of silver powder came to her hand and an applicator stuck in the other. Himiko tucked part of her leather jacket in her mouth and bit down. When the process was done, Momo looked at Himiko. Her costume was damaged, and she was missing her coat. Do we need ties for the others? No, was all Himiko said. Shipwreck zone. Sue yanked Mineta onto the boat. He tumbled from her grasp, holding his arm that had just been in the mouth of some villain that had tried to use its razor-sharp teeth to kill the diminutive hero in training while Itsuka was resting with some octopus villain. Mineta grabbed his orbs. The villain had come for him and shoved them down the villain's throat. Another was across the villain's nose when Sue yanked him out. Go get Itsuka, Mineta said, pulling a bandage. I will survive long enough till you get back. He did his best to wrap his arm, his breathing heavy. He thought he was about to die, and he tried to calm himself as his heart was pounding and tears threatened to fall. He did manage to recall the feel of Sue's bosom pressed against him and her arm around him, so that helped. Sue came leaping back with Itsuka, which was covered in blood and black ink, and she was holding more than one tentacle in her hand. Her costume was torn and not in a very beepy way by Mineta's standards. Sue came over to him and helped him bandage his arm. You okay, hero? She said. No, those things are trying to kill us, Mineta said. We are boned and not in a good way, there are more of them than us. We will get out of this, Itsuka said, steadying her breathing. Yes, we will, Sue added, patting his shoulder. Yeah, we have to. I don't want to die purely, Mineta said, getting to his feet. That would be a disservice to the female gender. Itsuka and Sue shook their heads, making them laugh slightly. I have no intention of dying today, Itsuka said. She peeked over the side. The villains were all hanging back, and one did fire some spikes, making her duck back. They don't know our quirks, she said. Sue, how far could you jump with Mineta? Nearly to shore, she said, her head tilted. Mineta, do those orbs stick even in the water? The boy nodded. Okay, here is my plan. Ruin zone. Koji and Izuku ran into the street and saw a flurry of activity as a group of villains fought a bloodied Toru. One villain was on the ground holding a broken leg as Toru kicked another one in the balls. Ducked under a wild swing from the villain, she brought her elbow up under their chin and sent them stumbling back. Koji and Izuku didn't stop as they ran to aid their classmates. Izuku landed a right cross, which made a sickening thud, and the sound of something breaking from his increased strength. Koji tackled another into his teammate. Izuku grabbed another by the head and bounced it violently off the ground with such force that blood immediately began to pool. Again, Izuku added more strength. Toru shoved a villain towards Izuku, who dropped him with a violent uppercut that lifted the man off his feet and shattered some ribs. Koji head-butted one, breaking their nose. One of the villains attempted to stab Toru in the back. The girl dodged but stumbled over another villain and fell to the ground. The villain tried to follow up, but Izuku grabbed the villain's arm, overpowering him and driving the knife into the villain's gut. He drove his fist across the villain's face, sending him down. Izuku smiled and added more blood from the downed villains. Koji handed Toru some bandages so she could stop the bleeding and wipe herself off. "You okay?" Izuku said. "Yes, rough landing. I ended up getting a cut on my head," Toru replied. "I wish my blood were invisible, that shit beeped. I need to thank All Might for the clothes. Some of them had terrible intentions, the dumb son of a bitch." "Incoming," Koji said, turning towards an alley as a large, bulky, highly muscular man with short, spiky, sandy blonde hair and tiny black eyes stood before them. They watched as his very muscles bulged, then burst from his skin, covering his body like armor. He looked over them and smiled sinisterly. Izuku's blood ran cold, muscular, he whispered. Izuku recognized him from the pit. He would come in occasionally and murder whoever was put into the pit with him. Izuku had watched this monster even kill a child in the hall for looking at him. That was not the only horror this thing had done. When someone was sent to him, they never returned, male or female. "Toru, Koji," Izuku said, slowly stepping before them. "When this starts, you need to run, and don't look back. If you see Himiko, tell her that Muscular is here." "Izuku," Toru said in protest. "Please, Toru, you don't know how dangerous this thing is. He is not a man, he is a monster," Izuku said. "I know him from the pit." "I know you," Muscular said, bouncing in place. "Where is that blonde bitch?" "Ringmaster wouldn't let me have her." "Gone," Izuku said, taking a deep breath. "Now," he yelled as he rushed in to attack Muscular. Toru hesitated, but Koji grabbed her and ran off. It wasn't out of fear, but he understood what Izuku was saying. His classmate was trying to buy them and the rest some time. Izuku rushed at Muscular. His heart was pounding in his ears, and he just needed to ensure his classmates got away. They needed to be ready to deal with someone of his caliber. Izuku was not prepared either, but he understood what he was against, whereas the others did not. It wasn't that Muscular would kill you, it was what would happen to you before and after he did so. This situation kept devolving into a worst-case scenario, but he had to get his class to safety, that was the order. Izuku looked at the massive scar on the villain's face, the apparent synthetic eye, and the head would be a weak spot. It seemed that he needed to go for the head when he got the chance. Izuku quickly grabbed some blood from the fallen villains. He had a good idea of the ones he had already consumed but couldn't afford to stop and take his time with what he collected. He felt his strength surge even more, but not as much as he hoped, but it would have to do. If he could make a Muscular bleed, then he might not only survive but also win. He would have his revenge. Shipwreck. Itsuka lay panting on the shore, catching her breath. Her finger was broken, but it had worked. Sue and Mineta were beside her. She rolled to her stomach as they slowly exited the tall grass. They could hear the sounds of battle coming from the plaza and the main door. "You're slowing down, Eraserhead," Shigaraki chuckled. "You should have run with your students. You may have had a better chance of living. I know I will make you deal. Tell where, what are their names?" They watched as the villain pulled out a piece of paper. "Tell me where the Midoriyas are, and I will let you pick 10 students to live." "Sorry, can't help you," Eraserhead replied. "Why are they after them? Are they after them or Eri?" Itsuka's mind screamed. This psycho was going to kill everyone here. The mist villain appeared next to Shigaraki. Its neck brace looked to be a melted mess, its clothes were full of acid burns, and it was cradling one of its arms like it had been broken. "One of the students has escaped, sir," it said. "Damn it, Kurogiri, if you weren't my ticket out of here, I would dust you myself," Shigaraki growled. "Nevertheless, let it not be said that I am not a generous god. Nomu break him," he waved his hand dismissively. Suddenly, the hulking beast that had not seemed to have moved since it emerged from the portal blurred and hit Aizawa with a thunderous punch, sending him flying back and spider-webbing against the wall. They saw blood fly from their teacher's mouth. The Nomu was on the move again. Mr. Aizawa barely managed to move his head to the side to avoid turning it into a paste. "We have to do something," Itsuka said as she bolted from cover, her body wrapped in lightning, she leapt at the back of the beast. Detroit smash, she roared, her enlarged fist collided with full force. Itsuka saw the best body ripple from the impact, but that was it. She pushed off the thing's back, avoiding a backhand strike. Stupid mobs. Shigaraki was about to intercept her when suddenly his leg was yanked out from underneath him as she and Mineta went flying over the top to Aizawa. "Eat my balls, you bastards!" Mineta yelled. The Nomu grabbed Aizawa by the head and hurled him into Sue and Mineta, knocking them out of the air. It blurred, ready to try and turn them into a paste. Mineta screamed, eyes closed. He just started hurling his quirk, his hands nearly blurring at how fast his hands were moving. Sue grabbed Aizawa in her arms, Mineta around the waist with her tongue, and tried to jump as far as she could. The Nomu was closing fast when suddenly it tripped and fell on Mineta's balls. Sue jumped away, getting to the front door. Ochako, her arm in an improvised sling made of Mina's jacket, came running over, along with Mina, who had a black eye and a broken horn. Ochako negated the gravity of their teacher as they attempted to move him to safety. Sue and Mineta looked around the area, and several villains were lying battered, with some looking broken even. Sue noticed Mina's and Ochako's clothing torn. Mineta did as well, but he seemed angry. He stumbled forward, pulling the orbs from his head. He winced repeatedly but used them to bind the villains to the floor. He looked at a villain who reminded him of a rock golem from video games. He was broken and battered, as if someone had used him as a bat. Itsuka was still in the plaza watching in horror as the Nomu tore its feet from its body to free itself from Mineta's quirk, then confirmed to the movie monster theme. She watched as they regrew. "This thing has multiple quirks," she said. She knew she couldn't focus on that right now. The thing had some shock absorption, as her punch had done nothing. While it was still regenerating, she grabbed the thing and leapt high into the air, twisting and hurling the creature towards the lake. As she was coming down, she saw a portal open underneath her. She immediately pushed one for all higher and fired an air blast that forced her to the side of the portal but sent her crashing to the ground. "Get the damn Nomu back here," Shigaraki commanded. A portal opened and poured water, soaking the field, but the Nomu also arrived. "Well beep," Itsuka muttered, getting to her feet. "Landslide zone." Momo took hold of Denki to guide him as they got moving. Kyoka was listening for any more people in their area, with Himiko moving at the point and knives at the ready. They didn't bother to ask Himiko about what had happened. Before they set out, Himiko told the girls, "Look, you both know these villains have bad intentions and killing us is not the only thing on their minds. Your normal try to survive villains don't take this kind of mission," Himiko said. "We have to take them down hard. They won't spare any of us, and I don't want you two to know what they will do you." Momo and Kyoka nodded. Some attackers had already clawed at their costumes. Momo cursed that her body was so mature and that the demands of her quirk had left so much of her body exposed. Never had she been more thankful for the rejection of her first hero costume. She would have to see if the fabric used to make Himiko's suit could be used for hers. She pushed down the feelings of them clawing at her and focused on the task. She knew what they wanted, and that was why she had made the stiletto. Momo was sheltered, but when she had committed to enter heroics, her mother and the head maid sat her down to lay out the realities of what may happen to her and what she needed to do to defend herself. No one would force themselves upon her body, that was her choice to whom to surrender that to. And none of these bastards were worthy. Kyoka just nodded as she secured the stiletto in her boot. "We got movement up ahead," Kyoka whispered. Himiko crouched low. Momo moved Denki against a wall as she readied to attack. "We have to keep moving," they heard a voice that sounded like Sato's. "Indeed, I am sorry that you had to see me succumbing to the darkness like that," Fumi said. "Yeah, sorry about that," Dark Shadow added. "It could have been much worse. Thankfully, I could use my fire enough to allow you to regain control," Shoto said. "But we have to find Izuku and Himiko." "Shoto, Fumi," Himiko called out. "Himiko," Shoto responded, looking momentarily relieved when she stepped out, but when he noticed the wound and the damage to Momo and Kyoka's costumes, his blood ran cold. He suddenly had little sympathy for the groups of villains he had trapped in ice. "Are all of you okay?" "We will live," Momo responded. the groups shared what information they had. Fumi had been dropped alone in a storm zone when the villains approached him. He unleashed Dark Shadow, but the fury of the battle and the lack of light to help keep his brother in control had caused Dark Shadow to rage. They saw Fumi with several bandages on his arms, and his eyes were swollen. Shoto and Sato had come together in a mudslide area. Shoto encased the villains in ice and discovered they were there to kill All Might and any of them. He also heard that the leader was looking for Himiko and Izuku. The villains didn't have names but were not to kill the girl with ash blonde hair or the boy with curly green hair. Why are they looking for you? Kyoka wondered aloud. I don't know, Himiko said. I don't know where Izuku is, but he is probably making his way to the doors. We need to get out of here. Let's get moving, Sato said as the group left. Izuku. Muscular's quirk was as disgusting as the man himself. When he activated it, layers of muscle would rip out of his body, covering him. It was like looking at a grotesque bodybuilder minus their skin. Now one would hope that this would make him slow, but he still was swift for his size into the realm of bullshit. Izuku was fast when he absorbed strength from others. He got faster, so he had the edge on speed, and with all the strength he had gathered before this fight had even begun, he was in nearly the best possible position he could wish for, minus having All Might's strength. That had been a rush and a half when he used it to kill Overhaul. Izuku rushed Muscular. He slipped to the side as the massive straight right came down at him. He ran his gauntlet across Muscular's arm, leaving a large gash as the collection units went to work running the blood up the tubes. He immediately ingested it and felt an incredible surge of strength and speed. Holy shit, Izuku thought. He felt a high from the sudden increase. Izuku didn't know if there was a limit to how much he could increase his strength, but he knew there was a limit to how much his body could withstand. He was going to have to store some back in order not to break himself, and use it when the opportunity arrived. He turned and ducked under a left hook, stepped in, and landed a shot at Muscular's stomach, but it seemed to have no effect as all the muscles there were acting like a type of body armor. He got his arm up to protect himself from the clubbing right that Muscular threw, but the force and strength knocked Izuku off balance. Using his guard, he absorbed the straight right that followed, which sent him skidding back, his arms aching. He saw another layer of muscle spring out as Muscular burst forward. Again, a wild haymaker from Muscular came forth. Izuku ducked in and fired a short uppercut just to cut into the muscles and gain more blood. Using his speed, he slipped to the side, landed a hard shot to Muscular's ribs, spun around to the villain's back, and kicked out the back of his knee. The villain dropped. While his upper body was incredibly vast and grotesque, his legs were not. It was a weak point that Izuku could attack. Izuku leapt into the air and landed a vicious Superman punch to the back of Muscular's head. Izuku paused when he saw an eye rolling across the floor, but Muscular did not. He grabbed Izuku suddenly and threw him away into the side of a building, it spider-webbed from the impact. Izuku fell to the ground, coughing up blood. Not bad, you are stronger than I gave you credit for, Muscular laughed. Guess I won't hold back anymore. Izuku watched as more layers of muscles sprang forth, covering the villain's legs. He baited me in, Izuku thought. Beep. Battle for the USJ. When the Nomu appeared, more portals opened, and more villains began to be deposited. When one opened, a villain came flying out with Ajiro on top of them. Yuga came through after them. He spun in midair and fired his naval laser. Suddenly, a massive explosion erupted from the portal, and on the other side of the USJ, screams could be heard before the portal snapped shut, black smoke billowed up, and out of the building. Ajiro stumbled off the bloody villain, getting to his feet. His hardened form had deep cracks running across it. Yuga's blonde hair was stained red, blood ran down his face, and his costume was cut, torn, and burned in some spots. He took a position on Ajiro's left, looking at the mob of villains standing between them and the doors. Ajiro looked at Yuga, then to the villains, and smirked. Who was beeping next? Brave mob, Shigaraki shrugged, kill everyone. Itsuka didn't hesitate. She burst forth from her spot, the ground breaking underneath her, her hands enlarged, and she bulldozed through the villains straight toward the Nomu. At the last second, her hand dipped into the ground, and she heaved with all her might, throwing the Nomu high into the air. Kurogiri turned to open a portal to bring the Nomu back when suddenly Su's tongue lashed out around his neck, yanked him back, and hurled him through the air. The villains, still standing, turned to converge on Itsuka, Eijiro, and Yuga. They didn't even see the squad with Shoto and Himiko come onto the scene. Shoto stomped his foot, sending a sheet of ice under a group before it shot up and launched them into the air. Ochako negated her gravity as she jumped off the rail, rocketing towards the Nomu on an intercept course. Dark shadow came tearing out, rising into the sky behind her. It seemed to attach itself to her, adding velocity and stability. Himiko wadded directly into the villains flanked by Momo and Sato. Sato grabbed the villains and hurled them into their comrades. Momo did as she could to drop the villains on the other side or dive them back as they fought toward their comrades. Himiko was cold, her blades in her hands, and she didn't hesitate to cut any limb or villain that stood before her. She did her best not to hit anything vital, but the chaos of the battle didn't leave her in a spot to stop and aim. Her reflexes still had their killer instinct. Ochako and Dark Shadow rocketed towards their target. She would have missed if not for Dark Shadow grabbing the Nomu by the leg and pulling them in. The sentient quirk landed a hard punch to the villain, but it had no effect. The Nomu surprisingly was able to counter, sending them tumbling away, but Ochako had managed to tag the monster, negating its gravity just as she had released them as they fell. She held in her puke. She can't save them without freeing the monster, Shoto yelled. He took a deep breath as his fire flared, chasing the frost from his body. He quickly built his ice and, sweepingly, sent a cliff of ice up to catch Ochako and Dark Shadow. They hit the ice slide and began to accelerate toward the group. Dark Shadow grunted as he dug his claws into the ice to slow them down. Kurogiri was tumbling through the air. He barely saw Mezzo leap up. Mezzo clasped all his multiple arms together and delivered a massive double axe handle smash to the villain's ribs, sending him crashing down to the ground. Kurogiri felt his ribs shatter, and he crashed and bounced off the ground. He opened a portal to pull himself back to Shigaraki, only for a rocky-headed student to grab his legs as he was halfway through and yank him back. Shigaraki just shook his head, wondering where the hell Muscular was. If you need something done, he ran towards the students, ready to show them what a natural raid leader could do. Izuku versus Muscular. Muscular was before him instantly. Izuku couldn't dodge the body blow that lifted him off his feet. Muscular grabbed him by his face, pivoted, and threw Izuku into a building as if he were a baseball. Izuku felt bones break as blood filled his lungs. He managed to see Muscular's charge, and with desperation, he dived to the side. Izuku desperately called upon his strength reserves, pushing his quirk. The crimson band sprung to life again, wrapping up his arms and across his chest, reinforcing his body. Muscular grinned. More muscles coated the villain, and he charged. Izuku ducked under the swing but caught a knee to his chest. Muscular grabbed him around the waist to toss him away like a rag doll, but Izuku managed to rip his gauntlets across the villain's arms, drawing more blood before he was thrown away. He did his best to roll with the impact, but it still sent him tumbling and crashing into a car. The effect was so significant that he left a massive dent in the vehicle. Blood wanted to erupt from his mouth, but he choked it down. He felt the surge of strength flood his body. Muscular had gotten so much stronger since he last ingested that it made Izuku shudder. If this monster got to the class, how many would he kill before anyone could stop him? Muscular, not one to admire his work mid-fight, rushed to end this little farce. Izuku pushed himself free and rolled to the side as the car was knocked into the building behind it. Muscular turned and was greeted by a leaping punch that snapped his head to the side. He didn't even see the spin kick snap his head back. Izuku landed and went low, bent at the waist. He threw the last of his reserved strength into a vicious haymaker to ribs, and as he followed through, his gauntlets did their job replenishing his reserve and filling him with strength again. Muscular was on the ground, pushing himself up. Izuku busted forward, breaking the concrete beneath him, and the running punt kick landed true. Izuku saw Muscular's jaw snap to the side and his orbital socket collapse where the grotesque synthetic eye had gone flying out. Izuku turned, pivoted, and launched another kick toward the villain's head, but Muscular caught Izuku's leg and hurled him away, bouncing across the hard pavement. UFWU King Bostad, I will wou and fwck were gwa dom school, Muscular spat out. Izuku pushed himself up. Sorry, I can't understand you, he smirked, blood seeping from various cuts and running down his face. Kurogiri. Kurogiri kicked Cody back, freeing himself. A small portal opened under one of the boy's legs. As his leg sank in right below the knee, the portal snapped shut, severing the leg. Cody screamed. Mezzo blanched but threw a hard right, his multiple arms tangled together, Kurogiri on one knee, his yellow eyes narrowed as another portal absorbed the attack and snapped closed. He didn't hesitate as he got to his feet and kicked Mezzo away. He turned, looking at the sky, and suddenly, the Nomu was back on the ground. He snatched the screaming Koda off the ground, opened another portal, and threw the boy through it, sending him crashing into stunned Ochako and Shoto. Kurogiri dropped through the portal with a double leg stomp, crashing into Shoto's back. He turned and stomped down Ochako's broken arm, making her scream. Shoto tried to reach his feet, only to fall through a portal into a group of villains. A portal opened on the battlefield as Muscular and Izuku came falling through. Muscular and Izuku were immediately on their feet, but Muscular landed his punch first on Izuku's chest. The crimson bands of Izuku's quirk fractured as he went flying back, and blood poured from his mouth. Dark Shadow came tearing at him, only to be swallowed by a portal that snapped shut. Fumi stumbled and fell back. Mina threw an acid strike only to see it fly through a portal and come crashing into Fumi's back. Release your quirk. He growled at Ochako. She spat at him in defiance. He reached down and punched her straight in the face, again and again, leaving a battered and bloody mess. Mina barreled into him, knocking him off. He rolled, grabbing the alien girl by the head. Mina coated her hands in acid and began to punch at anything she could hit. Kurogiri rolled to hip-toss Mina into an opening portal when suddenly a pair of headphone jacks flew out and stabbed into his eyes. He screamed, releasing Mina. He grabbed the jacks, but when it was too late, they began to vibrate, and his eyes exploded in his head. Denki stumbled, jumped on the screaming villain, and released his electricity. He kept shocking him until he stopped screaming. Denki stumbled to his feet from the smoking villain. He didn't pause as he raced to Cody, attempting to tourniquet his leg. Kyoka rushed to Mezzo, trying the same. The baton that had fallen from its grasp floated into the air. The villain that came jumping from being cloaked never saw the weapon swing for its head. It crashed to the ground. A few other villains froze in their tracks, but Toru was not about to let them anywhere near her friends. The baton flew out of her hand, breaking a villain's nose. She rushed the second one. It couldn't even react to her invisible attacks. She landed a brutal 6-strike combination, and the elbow across the jaw dropped the villain in a heap. The other shook off the broken nose, looking around for his attacker. Toru, engaged. She charged and speared the villain out of their shoes and drove her elbow into their head till they stopped moving. She pushed up and off the villain, looking for any other fools daring to attack her class. Ochako's head wobbled as she passed out. The Nomu's feet were on the ground. Battle. Momo spun under a claw strike, only to be tackled to the ground by another villain. She felt dozens of pinpricks from the impact. She screamed as the pinpricks enlarged, driving the spikes nearly through her body. She pulled the stiletto blade and jammed it unquestioningly at her attacker. She felt it strike and sink deep, and when she kicked the villain away, she saw them stumble, holding their neck as blood flowed like a river from the wound. Momo tried to push herself up, but she slipped and fell, and blood was pouring from her wounds as well. She didn't see the claw strike come down and dive deep into her thigh. She screamed. Himiko heard the scream. She leapt, landing on the claw villain's back, drove her knives into the neck, and ripped out. The villain's head spun through the air. She kicked off and was in midair when a massive muzzle clamped around her midsection, dragging her back to the ground. The villain was a mutated hyena type but was huge, moving more animal than human. It shook its head from side to side, tearing open the wound more. Himiko screamed but drove her blade into the creature's ear, making it scream and release her. Sato fired off a hard right, but the villain's hand suddenly turned into a metal shield blocking the hit. Sato felt his hand break. Another villain dived and tackled him behind the knee, sending him down as the metal bucker clanged off his head. the villain that tackled him drew a knife and plunged it into his back. Mina didn't see the Cobra villain coming behind her till it was too late. She grabbed the villain's head as the fangs plunged in deep, secreting acid. She heard the thing scream and release. She stumbled forward, her arm began to burn, and the sensation quickly started to flood her body. She collapsed to her knees. The villain hissed and came down to strike again. Mineta ran, pushed off Mina's back, and dove straight toward the villain's mouth. With a stunning display of talent, Mineta jammed 2 of his balls onto the villain's fangs. The Cobra villain fell back. Mineta jammed a few balls onto its head and slammed it to the ground. Toru was tangled in combat with another snake villain. This one seemed to be able to track her, as it had a more snake-like body than a human. Toru had wedged its mouth open with the baton when it dared to swallow her. She grabbed a jagged piece of metal and charged at the thing, as it had just dislodged the baton. At the last second, she rolled to the side, and just held the improvised blade up and let the thing tear itself open, showering her in blood. Shoto landed in a pack of villains that turned and descended upon him with a brutal fury. Shoto covered up and called upon his ice, creating a spiked sphere that exploded from him, impaling the villains. He stumbled to his feet as he saw Izuku fly out of a portal with some large muscle-covered villain and get launched away. Itsuka ducked under a clumsy attack, grabbed the villain, and hurled him into his companions. A sudden screaming in her head made her duck, and she saw Shigaraki's hand fly just an inch over her head. She spun and swept his leg, and they both kicked up to their feet. He went for a palm strike that she batted away, and with lightning surging suddenly through her body, she stepped forward and landed a straight punch to his sternum. Her fist enlarged at the last second and sent him flying back. The hands covered his body, flying everywhere. Itsuka leapt into the air, her fist reared back, ready to end this. The Nomu had other plans. It appeared out of nowhere. Its fist came crashing into her side, breaking her ribs, redirecting her into the wall that shattered behind her. She tumbled across the ground. But the Nomu was not done. It followed, snatched her by her head, and dragged her face across the pavement before it spun and threw her through the fountain. Sue came crashing into the shield villain's back with a thunderous leg stomp. She grabbed and threw him into his compatriot as she helped Sato. He pushed past her and punched another villain rushing at her back, sending them through the air. She spun off his shoulder and kicked another, turning their lights out. As she landed, she didn't stop. She sprung forward, speaking another villain in the gut that was going after Momo. She struck him, and he was knocked out when they hit the ground. Sato stumbled as 2 feral cat villains dived into him. He grabbed them by their heads and ripped them off, but their claws had already bit deep. The Nomu charged towards the down Itsuka, her body screaming at her to get up. She tried but stumbled. The massive fist of the monster was racing towards her. Suddenly, Eijiro was in front of her. He crossed his arms, and the enormous blow struck. He didn't fall, but he did slide back, his arms cracked, blood falling. The Nomu was about to roar at them when a laser beam ripped over them and into the thing's mouth. It nearly took the things to head off. Itsuka got to her feet, and she barely had time to push Eijiro to the side as the thing had regenerated and was trying to smash them both. Yuga stumbled and shouted, "Vive la France!" A massive laser beam erupted, his belt shattered, and a gigantic hole was burned through the Nomu. Yuga didn't see the bat coming that collided with his skull. Dark Shadow grabbed the villain that had attacked Yuga, threw it violently back over its head, and snatched Yuga, pulling the boy back to safety. Itsuka got to her feet again, and her body screamed to move. She turned and saw Shigaraki's crimson eyes. His hand grabbed her face, but nothing happened. From the railing holding himself up was Mr. Aizawa, his hair floating, his quirk active. Beeping eraser. Shigaraki didn't get a chance to finish as Itsuka grabbed his arm and broke it, spun, and elbowed him in the back of the head. She kicked the back of his knees and landed a massive fist on his back and another on the back of his head, bouncing it off the floor. Eijiro didn't see the Nomu grab him and throw him into Itsuka. The horror movie monster has not been done yet. Himiko got to her feet. She saw Izuku duck under another punch from Muscular. Her eyes widened when she recognized him. She saw her husband land 2 massive body shots. Muscular retaliated with a knee, driving him down. Ignoring her wounds, She tried to stumble forward but fell. She saw a deadly overhand punch coming towards Izuku's head, and she screamed, reaching out for him. Then, an ice pillar appeared out of nowhere, launching Muscular away, his attack missing. Izuku stumbled to his feet as Muscular landed and was ready to come in again. "Shoto, can you hold him just for a moment?" he said as Shoto came to his side. "I will not fail you, brother," Shoto said. Muscular charged. The Nomu raced towards Itsuka and Ajiro. Itsuka reached deep with everything she had. The green lightning uploaded, and she threw the most potent punch she could as the Nomu did the same. The collision knocked those in the vicinity off their feet. Itsuka just let go and began trading blows with the monster, their punches blurring. But blood was flying from Itsuka as cuts opened up. The Nomu was unaffected. She faltered, but the Nomu did not. It landed a series of blows in a row. The final strike sent her flying back, and she tried to rise. Ajiro launched himself at the Nomu only to be batted away like a fly. Muscular smirked. "You are wed," he said through his broken jaw. "Sorry, what?" Izuku said, spitting out some blood. Muscular face twisted into contempt and rage as he charged in. Suddenly, his body was encased in ice, halting his charge. Izuku pushed off the ground. Muscular watched as Izuku leapt into the air. All the blood bands around his body broke free. They wrapped around his arm as Izuku's fist reared back. The doors to the USJ burst open, and the Nomu's fist was about to come crashing down on Itsuka, killing her. Then suddenly All Might was there. "You have done well, young Kendo. I will take it from here," All Might said after catching the punch. He then saw the other fist. "My, you are a strong one. All Might, be careful, it has some sort of shock absorption," Itsuka said. "Good, then I won't have to hold back," All Might grinned as he pushed the Nomu back. "You shall meet your end today, foul beast." The two titans collided. Itsuka tried to follow the attacks, but they were going even faster. Her body was battered and bruised. Shigaraki came out of nowhere, looking to attack All Might from behind. Itsuka grabbed his leg and yanked him back. He spun, kicked free, and dove at her. She caught his hand and threw him away. All Might never looked back, trusting in her. His punches began to fly faster. "You will never defeat my Nomu, All Might. Today is the day you die," Shigaraki yelled. "No, you deluded fool, today is the day you understand what go beyond means." All Might roared. They saw the Nomu's body begin to rise off the ground from the fury and force of All Might's blows. Plus Ultra. All Might roared as the Nomu flew up and out of the USJ. "Now, you wretch," All Might said, turning. Itsuka could see him smoking. His time was about to run out. "Care to try where you beast failed?" Shigaraki, frothing at the mouth, ran at All Might blindly. Itsuka, enraged, jumped and landed a spinning kick that sent Shigaraki back, crashing into a wall. The rest of the heroes came bursting in. Tenya froze as he saw Izuku midair, a villain frozen in ice. Muscular thrashed, roaring in defiance. The disgusting muscle tore from his face, surrounding his head in an appalling barrier. Blood explosion. Izuku yelled as all the blood bands around his body surged to his arm. It halted at the sinew and muscle helmet, but Tenya saw it push through. Muscular watched as the blood-wrapped fist came breaking through. His eyes went wide. Past the first he saw Izuku's eyes boring into him. That was the last thing that Muscular ever saw. "No!" Shigaraki yelled without warning. A black sludge erupted from his mouth, enveloping the villain completely. The same thing happened to Kurogiri, and they were gone. Izuku landed and stumbled, holding his broken arm. He was about to fall, but Shoto was there to catch him. "The teachers are here," Shoto said. "We are safe now." "That is good," Izuku said, his head drooping. He looked around the battlefield. He saw villains surrendering as third years began to flood the field as well. He saw his wife, who stumbled to him, wrapping her arms around him. Shoto guided them to the floor, calling for medical attention. "You killed him," she whispered, tears running down her cheeks. "I told you that I would if I ever got the chance," Izuku whispered. "He will never touch you or anyone else again." They both fell unconscious in each other's arms. S.P. When Auntie Nemi came to pick her up, Eri knew something was wrong. The day was not over, and her mommy and daddy were absent. Rei would get her, or maybe Fuyu, but not Auntie Nemi. What happened? Eri said, staring at Nimari. Her fists were clenched at her sides, her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set. Nothing happened, Nimari started to say. You are lying, Eri shouted, startling the other children in the daycare. Don't lie to me. I am sorry, Eri, Nimari said. There was an incident during training today, and they were badly hurt. I am sorry for lying to you, Eri. Nimari extended her hand. Are they dead? Eri said as a few tears fell. Don't lie to me, are they dead? No, Eri, they are not dead, but they are hurt, Nimari said. Then I can fix them, Eri said, wiping her tears. She grabbed her bag and started walking to the door. If they are not dead, then I can fix them. Eri, Nimari whispered and walked after the little girl. That is not why I came to get you. I came to get you to take you to them. You don't need to do anything. No, that is wrong, Eri said, not looking back. She exited the daycare. Eri looked around and saw the golf cart. She walked over and climbed on, quickly buckling her seatbelt. A good person does not do something because they need to do it because they can. Who told you that? Nimari said. My mommy and daddy, Eri stated. They want me to be a good person. Eri rode with Nimari silently, her fist still balled in her lap. When they arrived at the medical wing, there was chaos as people were running everywhere. So many of the class had been injured, and tense measures were being taken to stem the flow of bleeding from the severity of the injuries. Eri just looked at Nimari, who took her to the window where Himiko was being treated for the massive wound in her abdomen. Nemi lifted Eri into her arms when she heard the girl sniffle. The tears ran down Eri's cheeks, but aside from the sniffle, that was the only indicator. How long ago? Eri said, not taking her eyes off her mother fighting for her life. Eri, the doctors are doing all they can, Nimari said. But your mommy has lost a lot of blood. But she isn't dead, Eri said, a fierceness in her voice. What time did they get to where they got hurt? Eri, are you going to try to use your quirk? Nimari asked. I am not going to try, Eri said, squirming from Nimari's arms. No one is taking my mom and daddy from me, no one. Eri wiped her tears. I put them back together before. Eri walked over and yanked at the door, but it didn't open. How will it work? Nimari said. I just have to take them back to the right time, Eri said. Mousy has been teaching me. So if I know when they were safe, I can match it to what I was doing. Damn it, Nezu, Nimari whispered. They arrived at 9:15. Okay. Got to school, played, we were doing math, and that was when Jasper started to cry that something was bad, Eri said. Open the door. Let me save my mommy, please, Auntie, she said to Nimari, yanking on the door. Open the door. Nimari turned and saw Nezu standing there, tearing away a blood-soaked surgical gown. But sir, Nimari protested. She is just a child. They are all children, Nimari, Nezu said. Even you were at one time, but this child has seen more than most will in an entire lifetime. Let her save her parents, and maybe we can ask her to save the others, or would you rather tell the other parents that their children died on our watch? Nimari opened the door. Everyone back away from the patient, she bellowed. Startled, they all backed away. Eri just ran, scrambling up on the bed, not caring about the blood. She straddled her mom and closed her eyes. Jasper was crying, Eri whispered. Everyone was stunned as Eri's horn began to glow as time rewound around Himiko. Blood seemed to flow back into her, some just materializing out of thin air around them. The wounds closed, all battle marks disappeared, the glow faded, and Himiko's eyes snapped open. Mommy, Eri said as Himiko sat up and hugged Eri. Eri, Himiko whispered. I have to go save Daddy, Eri whispered. How did you do this? Himiko asked reluctantly, letting her daughter go. Mousy taught me, Eri said. I am a good person like you and Daddy said. Eri climbed off of a stunned Himiko as they led her to Izuku. Izuku was in surgery being treated for intensive internal bleeding. Eri's sudden entry into the area was met with yells from the medical staff. Eri climbed on Izuku as she did with Himiko. Nimari flinched as Izuku was cut open on the table as they had been trying to stop the bleeding in his chest and repair damage to an artery. Oh, Daddy, Eri said. At least it isn't as bad as last time. She closed her eyes, and her horn glowed. It was gruesome as the clamp holding the artery flew out of Izuku's body. The blood spurted out, splattering Eri in the face, but the little girl didn't flinch as the blood removed itself from her face just as quickly, and Izuku's body was rewound in time. "Hi, baby," Izuku said as his eyes opened. "Did you save your mommy first?" Eri nodded. "You such a good girl." "I have to go now, Daddy," Eri said, wiping away some tears. "If not, other mommies and daddies are going to cry." "My little hero," Izuku whispered as Eri climbed off him. "Toru, Ermina," Eri said to Nimari. "Eri, I have to ask if you can heal Kota," Nezu said, stepping forward. They took his leg. Eri just nodded. Eri's dress was covered in blood, but the little girl just nodded and took his hand. Recovery girl turned and yelled when the door to the surgical room opened, and Nezu walked in, holding Eri's hands. "What in the world are you doing?" "She is going to save Kota," Nezu said. Recovery girl went to say something, but Nezu's animalistic glare stunned her into silence. Eri didn't hesitate to climb up on the bed with Kota. "Oh, Kota," Eri whispered. "The bunnies will be so sad, and you promised to teach me to talk to the birds." Eri's horn glowed, and the room watched a leg regrow, and Koji Kota be brought back from the brink of death. His eyes opened, and he saw Eri sitting on the bed next to him. "You all better now," she smiled and hopped off the bed, walking over to Nezu. Nezu just took the little girl to the next person. Momo's eyes opened to Eri holding her hand. She sat up with no marks or pain and looked at Eri wide-eyed. "You look like a princess when you sleep," Eri said as she hopped down. Eri wobbled before taking Nezu's hand. "I can keep going." Eri reached out and touched her horn, which got smaller every time she healed. "3 more," Eri said. The unicorn of the UA healed Mina and 13 before she went to Aizawa. 13 was too shocked to say anything, watching the little girl in the blood-soaked gown walk out of the room. When Aizawa's eyes snapped open, Eri was wobbling by his side. "Eri," he whispered. He noticed her horn was nearly non-existent. "I want my mommy and daddy now," Eri said, looking at Nezu. "Of course," Nezu said. Nimari lifted Eri into her arms. The little girl's head was drooping as she was carried to her parents. When she saw them, she smiled. "I did the best I could," she slurred as she leaned forward into Himiko's arms. "Then you did amazing," Himiko said, tightly cuddling Eri. "The best hero in the world," Izuku said, kissing her forehead. Her eyes fell closed, and he looked at Nimari and Nezu. "Are the others going to make it?" "Those with the most significant damage that needed the medical attention have been saved," Nezu said. "We will not lose anyone this day, at least not to death." "She was magnificent." "Yes, she is," Himiko said as she, Izuku, and Eri laid back on the recovery bed. Nezu and Nimari left the family alone. "USJ. We need more body bags," a third year with a shark mutation called out as he came out of the water. "There are 4 more stuck at the bottom of the lake." "What the hell happened here?" "Medics have gotten the ones frozen in the landslide zone free and are being medevac out," Snipe said as he called for more body bags to the shipwreck zone. Mirio radioed in that he had found 3 more bodies in a cave in the mountain zone. They appeared to have been disemboweled and castrated, sir. "Refinery zone. The fire is under control now," Cementos called in. "We will begin body retrieval now." Snipe rubbed his nose. "Ectoplasm, how is the courtyard?" "Just the corpses to clean up," Ectoplasm called back. Lo-Fi retrieved the video footage, which was sent to Nezu. "Ruin zone is reporting the least casualties. First responders were able to get them stable for transport. The next fleet of ambulances is 5 minutes out. The 4 villains trying to escape through the tunnels have been caught," Najire said. "We found a 5th just sitting there, ready to surrender. They are willing to talk. They said a broker hired them. Tamaki is bringing him up now." "Good job, Najire," Snipe called back. "Do you need assistance with the others?" "No sir, I have them," Najire called back. "But can you send a crew with 3 body bags? I found them at the entrance to the ruin zone. They have been ripped apart." Snipe heard Najire's voice waver. Tenya Ida, he had done it again, and no one was saying anything. That villain was encased in ice and helpless, and Izuku Midoriya murdered that man in cold blood. He was pacing the floor as he waited for the arrival of his parents. They had been notified of the attack. This had to be addressed, he thought. This cannot continue. He thought about approaching Tensai, but he dismissed it. He had brought enough trouble down on his brother, so he didn't want to involve him more than necessary. Tenya had been part of the fight at the door, but only briefly, as Mina's acid opened the door quickly, and he went to get help. Ochako, Mezzo, and he held the attackers back, allowing her to create the opening. When he saw a large portal open, Rock Golem dropped out as he left to get help. When they came bursting in, he saw that same villain broken. But even that villain was alive. As the third year flooded the USJ, he was told to wait outside. If there had been any deaths that day, Tenya was confident they could be laid at the feet of the Midoriyas. Tenya shuddered at how his classmates would have been helpless seeing those two monsters mercilessly kill right in front of them. The true horror of what those two pretenders were had to be clear now. He wanted to check on them, but so many were horrendously injured. There was hope, and the responding faculty surely had to have seen the same thing he did. Izuku Midoriya killed an immobile villain in cold blood. Poor Todoroki, an unwilling accomplice, surely now that the scope of villainy had been laid before him, he, like the rest of the class, would support their removal from the hero course. When his parents arrived, he embraced them as his mother fussed over him before they were cleared to leave. He looked back at the medical wing. Today was a horrible day, but at least there was a silver lining to the clouds that had fallen over them, Tenya thought. There was no way that the rest of the class's eyes had not been opened. Medical wing. The parents descended on UA Medical. Those not healed by Eri had their parents sitting at the bedside as they were all asleep from Recovery Girl using her quirk to speed up the mending of bones. Momo found Izuku in the waiting area with a cup of coffee. "How is Himiko and Eri?" Momo asked. "Eri is asleep. She is exhausted," Izuku replied. "Himiko is with her." Momo said before pausing, lost for words. "It is okay, Momo," Izuku said. "You don't have to say anything. Are you going home?" Momo said, wiping the tears that ran down her cheek. "No, not tonight," Izuku said. "When the class is released, then we will. We all go home together." "I think I would like to stay," Momo said. "I know that Himiko is healed, but Kyoka is still recovering. I want to know if she is going home. In the pit after the fight, we wouldn't leave till they came for the body, especially if it was a friend." Izuku taking a drink. "Did you ever get used to it?" Momo said. "It is even possible. Some people did, but it was more that you were just numb," Izuku responded. "Sometimes it's worse than others, those that I don't lose any sleep about, but it wasn't always the case." "How do I deal with it?" Momo said she started to cry again when she felt his arms around her. "There is a difference between killing and murder," Izuku said. "In a fight, sometimes people will be killed. It is the nature of a battle. They are trying to kill you, and the level of violence just increases, leaving you no choice but to retaliate in the same manner. Murder is cold. You hunted them down with that being your sole intention." Momo held onto him tightly. "You are a good person, Momo. It will bother you no matter what, and that is a good thing. When you think about the fight, you will think of something else you could have done not to get that route, but that is because you have the luxury of not being in the moment. But learn from it for next time." They broke apart as she created a tissue. "I am going to go sit with Kyoka. When Himi wakes up, I will let her know." He gave her a soft smile as she walked away. Izuku threw his empty cup away and saw Shoto standing in the doorway. "Everything all right, Shoto?" "I have to ask a question," Shoto said, walking towards him. "Why did you kill him?" "Muscular." Shoto nodded. "Muscular is the type of monster that, unless you are All Might, won't stop. I might have done it differently if I had known backup would come in. But that is a lie. With Muscular, it was personal." "Can you tell me about it?" Shoto said nervously. "Muscular is a murderer, a rapist, and a necrophiliac," Izuku said. "If he would have killed any of us, what he would have done to the body after is the stuff of nightmares. One night in the pit, he got a hold of Himiko and didn't take no for an answer." Izuku was looking out the window. I have seen animals in pit fights leave the person in better condition. If it weren't for Eri, she would have died. I promised her that if I ever got the chance, I would make sure that he would never be able to touch her again. Izuku turned back to Shoto. Some were not so lucky, boys, girls, and children. I am sorry for putting you in that situation. Don't be, Shoto said, placing his hand on Izuku's shoulder. I trust you. I trusted that you had a reason to take that thing's life. I will always trust you, Izuku. I just wanted to ask what that reason was. Thank you, Shoto, Izuku said with a smile. Are you going home? No, I am going to sit with Sato and Fumi, Shoto smiled back. I wouldn't be right to go home without them. Izuku looked in on Itsuka, seeing she was with her family. He returned to his. Himi's eyes cracked open, but she just smiled and snuggled Eri as she fell back into dreamland. Izuku settled into the chair beside them and closed his eyes, hoping to join them. Aside from Tenya, not a member of 1A went home that night. Joy, the leader of the wild beepcats, Mandalay, was a young woman with brown eyes and red hair. As she was home, she wasn't in the recognizable costume of the group. Instead, she wore dark leggings, a knee-length skirt, and a simple red shirt. She had just finished helping her nephew Kota with his homework. Kota was the only son of her sister and part of the pro-hero team, the Water Hose. She had been killed along with her husband defending a village from the monster known as Muscular. Kota was barely 3 years old when they died, and he came to live with his aunt. It had and still was a rough adjustment period as Kota carried a lot of anger and grief stemming from the incident and leaving an icy relationship between him and his only other relative, his aunt Shino. Shino or Mandalay was doing the best that she could, but it wasn't easy. She was heading towards the kitchen to check on her teammates and dinner as Ryuko, aka Pixie Bob, and Tomoko, aka Ragdoll, were in charge of dinner tonight. This meant it would be a culinary masterpiece or a culinary experience. The god of fate was fickle when it came to such things. She left the hall and saw Ryuko's blonde hair swaying back and forth as she seemed more concerned with dancing than cooking. Her blue eyes shined as she tried to get Tomoko to join in. Tomoko's long green hair was tied back, and her yellow eyes looked at Ryuko suspiciously as she was tending to a pot boiling on the stove. Yawara, aka Tiger, was sitting on the couch with their laptop open and a pencil between his teeth. Tiger turned to Mandalay. How is he? The same, but at least he asked for help tonight with the homework instead of just not doing it, Mandalay responded. I hope it is a positive sign. How are the books looking? Good, Tiger said with a smile. With being the host for the summer camp for UA this year again, we will be able to pay off the rest of the title on the land and start to rebuild our savings after the completion of the new baths. Well, that is good, Mandalay said when her phone rang, and the seductive tone of midnight beeping filled the room. That woman, Mandalay sighed. Hello Nimari, I see you changed my ringtone again somehow. What? The rest of the team froze, hearing the shocked tone from their leader. Are you sure? Don't beep with me, Nimari. You better not be playing with me. The anguish suddenly flooded Mandalay's voice as he sank to the floor. Her teammates ran over, surprised to see tears rolling down her face. Oh God, no, thank you so much, Nemi, thank you. Mandalay hung up the phone as her team was crowded around her. What is it? Pixie Bod said. Mandalay tried to wipe the tears away, but they wouldn't stop falling. She looked up at her team, smiling. Muscular is dead, she said in between the tears. Muscular is beeping dead. To be continue. I hope you enjoyed this story. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.